Good morning, everybody. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Marla Billinghurst. I'll be chairing the panel this morning. To my left is Ms. Cynthia Stevens, and to my far left is Mr. Brent McIntyre. The assessor this morning is Ms. Lindsay Wareham, and the recording secretary is Ms. Kelsey Harrison. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decision with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemption from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. The first matter on the docket this morning is 120 James Avenue.
Do you swear in or affirm? Could you please state your name?
Lindsay Wareham.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. Could you please state your name?
Rocky Newville?
Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please proceed when you're ready.
Before we start, I just
yes.
wanted to know the procedure. We have 3 points of appeal.
Sorry, I didn't flip the
That
page.
was going to be my question as well.
Okay, are we going ahead with all 3 today?
Yeah, so I was just wondering how you were going to structure our debate. Well, no, because I know that burden of proof is different on each of these items. And sometimes when you get really long, then if we start with burden of proof on class and then the burden of proof then gets shifted to the assessor on value, it makes for a long hearing. So some boards have simply said, the assessor go first, and well, but I just want you to tell us.
Usually we just go first with the assessor.
Okay. And then we'll have the discussions sort of switch when the burden of proof is placed on the applicant for the class liability?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so dealing with the quantum, we have file number 19-4410, roll number 13096197500. The address is 120 James Avenue. This is a condo unit as part of a condo building located on the southeast corner of James Avenue and Porthos Street. It's between Elgin Avenue and James Avenue. I'm requesting to increase the 2020 assessed value from $237,000 to $327,000. We have 6 indoor parking stalls and 8 outdoor parking stalls. If you look at the page 2, you'll see aerial photos of the subject property showing its location. In the bottom left-hand picture, you'll see the outdoor parking stalls. On page 3, you'll see photos of the subject property. In the top photo, you see the parking stalls that are there. There are 8 outdoor parking stalls, and on the bottom picture of page 3, that white door is the garage entrance into the indoor parking. On page 4, you'll see request for income and expense information. On page 5, you'll see the income workup for the outdoor parking stalls. We have 8 outdoor parking stalls with our monthly net unit rent of $103.50 a stall, with a 4.5% cap rate for a value of $121,000. On the bottom of my page 5, you'll see comparables. These are all comparables in the subject property area, located in close proximity to the subject property. They range from $90.01 upwards of $300.74. On page 6, you'll see the parking structure workup. We have 6 indoor stalls and a monthly net unit rent for the unheated indoor stalls of $103.50, with a 7% cap rate for a value of $106,000. On the bottom of my page 6, you'll see comparables. These are all parking structures. The only ones not located in the downtown are numbers 1 and number 2. Number 1 is a heated parking structure located in St. Boniface, and number 2 is a unheated parking structure at the St. Boniface Hospital. The remainder of the comparables are parking structures all located in the downtown. Some of them are heated, some of them are unheated, a number of them are unheated, and some of them are both. The closest parking structures to the subject property are 170 McDermott Avenue, 136 McDermott Avenue, 100 King, and those are all unheated parking structures. On page 7, you'll see typical gross rates. These are taken from parking websites as of the reference date to show what typically is being charged for monthly, hourly, daily, and evening and weekend rates for a number of parking structures in the downtown. On page 8, you'll see the income valuation summary for the subject property, the parking lot that has been already described, as well as the parking structure for a total value of $327,000. On page 9, you'll see cap rate information. This is cap rate information for the property types. As you know, none of these are parking structures, parking lots, I should say. Our model cap rate for this area for parking lots is 4.5% for this cycle. It was 5% last cycle. And for parking structures, it was 7.5%, and it is 7% for parking structures this cycle. When looking at cap rates for parking structures and parking lots, they are properties that aren't traded all that often with respect to parking structures. Parking structures really haven't traded. The last sale with reported income information on it and a reported cap rate was from 2010, and that was 299 Fort Street, and that sold at an 8% cap rate it was reported at. We have to look at other property types when reviewing cap rates as well to figure out what is happening with cap rates in the market. Are they compressing? Are they staying stable with respect to parking structures? Since 2010, when we had that 8% cap rate sale that was there, we have been noticing a compression in cap rates from 2010. Parking lots, on the other hand, they trade with a variety of cap rates, and when they do trade, they trade for a variety of reasons. They can be ancillary uses, they can sell for redevelopment. So caution needs to be taken when looking at those cap rates, which is why there's a large range. If you look at an income from a parking lot and then it's bought for redevelopment, you're looking at really low cap rates in around the 1% range. If you're looking at parking lots that possibly sell as ancillary uses or didn't have a lot of income on it, sometimes you have higher cap rates, but we're in and around that 4.5% for parking lots in this area of the downtown. The 4.5% is also, when you look at the cap rates that I've shown in our agenda on page 28, we've provided a variety of cap rates for actual sales that have taken place that our department has reviewed. This is supplementary evidence that we've provided showing what cap rates are. These are bona fide arm's length sales where they have been reviewed on a stabilized 3-year income to come up with the NOI. And you'll note that for office properties, they range from about 5.1% upwards of 6.5%. For retail, you've got a range of 3% upwards of 7%. For multifamily, you range from about 4% to 5%, and industrial, you have a range of about 5% to 8%. The premise that parking lots are typically vacant land, and vacant land does not have a cap rate on it. When you look at cap rate for a parking lot, when you have lower risk involved as it's an interim use, you have people just parking there, you don't have a lot of capital costs involved. It doesn't make a lot of sense for a parking lot cap rate to be higher than improved properties that do have capital costs and more risk involved and more effort on behalf of the owner. That's why we have our 4.5% cap rate on that. If you turn to page 11, you'll see the income INE mailer that was submitted by the owner. They haven't reported any income on this mailer, as well as any expenses other than gas meters and property taxes. They also haven't indicated that they have any stalls here for rent. Typically, in the past, and I've included a previous mailer on page 13, the owner had reported the parking revenue on the office unit at 128 James. So I included the 2015 mailer indicating that there are 6 stalls inside and outside and the rates that they do charge for that, just to show that there is parking here. You'll note that the owner has reported 6 stalls and we have 8. That is one of the reasons for the request for increase, due to the correction from 6 stalls to 8. An inspection was made on the property, and you'll note on page 16 the photos that I have. The stalls are actually numbered. So these photos were taken on January 3rd, 2018. And if you look, you'll see that the stalls along the building are stalls 1 through 7, and there's signs on them. And as well, if you look on the second photo down on the left, there's actually a photo on the second garage door that's not used to get cars into the parking structure. So there are actually 8 stalls here. There is signage for them indicating that people are parking there, which is one of the reasons for the request for increase. And then on page 25, we have the addenda that the City of Winnipeg provides, indicating that we're taking, with each reassessment, we take a fresh look at information that's been provided to us. We're all aware that every reassessment cycle, new data is reviewed, and we come up with our information, our assessments based on that new data and our analysis of that data. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions on the value front.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Newfeld.
The pictures you mentioned taken January 23rd, did you take these pictures?
Yes, I did. I was inspecting another property nearby, and when I was walking past, I happened to notice, so I took some photos.
Was that the last time you had inspected the property, or have you been there since?
I have not been there since, but the Google pictures that I provided on my brief on page 3, the Google date stamp on it said July 2019.
Well, getting back to the change in your value, can you just repeat for me what those specific changes were?
We reviewed, when I looked at this property for the appeal purposes, I noticed that we still had 6 stalls on this property, and I knew that I had inspected this property and there were 8.
6 exterior?
6 exterior, yes.
Okay,
And
so-
there were 8 exterior.
So you changed 6 exterior to 8 exterior?
Yes.
Any change on the interior count?
No.
And was there a change in value done at the same time?
There was a change in value done when I noticed that the model parameters that had been placed on the monthly net unit rents per stall for the heated and unheated, well, the unheated indoor and the unheated outdoor, the surface stalls, I noticed that it was not fair and equitable with the other parking lots in the area and how we were assessing them. And I noticed that the change for the 2020 reassessment had been missed, so I had to correct those because it was not fair and equitable with what was happening on
Give me the former and the current numbers, please.
The previous number was $90 a stall for both, and now it's $103.50, which is the same as how we assess any parking lots in the area,
And that's
as well as parking
interior and exterior, the same rate?
Yes. Our unheated parking structure model, as well as our surface model, they provide the same information. It looks as to when you review the gross rates for parking structures, unheated parking structures as well as surface, they're charging about the same rate to people because you're still outside, it's still cold, it's not heated. So we've been noticing that the gross rates that are charged are similar, as well as the rates that are being reported on mailers are similar. So our model for both have the same rate on them.
When was this decision made to review an increase, request an increase?
The decision was made when I reviewed the property for the appeal purposes.
Do you have a date or approximate date on that?
I don't know the date that I actually reviewed the information. I got this docket, I'm actually not sure what date I got the docket, so I wouldn't be able to speak to it, but when I was given the docket, I go through in order of the properties, so this would have been the first one that I looked at, and I noticed right away, and so I looked at my workup, I looked at, because I had done a couple previous dockets, and because
You don't know the date?
I don't know the date.
Sometime after June 24th and before October 31st?
I don't understand.
Well, the appeal was filed. Between the time the appeal was filed and your evidence, we can narrow it down to at least that period?
Yes.
Or was it decided before then?
It was decided I got back to work on September 30th, so sometime between September 30th and the date of our exchange.
Okay. And the process for requesting an increase, I'm just wondering if you could just give us an idea. Was this your decision?
Yes, any information that I look through when I'm handling an appeal, I look at the information in front of me. I'm very aware of the rates that we assess other properties at, and I knew that this was an error, and I wanted to correct it to make it fair and equitable with all the other properties being assessed. And then I reviewed all the information that I have, and I knew it was appropriate to do so, so I
I
did.
was interested in the process. Now, when you make this determination, what do you do within the department?
I review the information and I put together a workup and my information and comparables, and I present it to my supervisor. He has to agree with my analysis and approve it, and then it needs to go through the remainder of our senior management team, so then they take the request for increase as well as the workup and reason for increase. So when I do a workup, I have a large paragraph that I write, statements as to why we're increasing it, which is what I've explained here today, that an error was made in the stall counts and we were correcting it, and an error was made in correcting the model parameters applied to make it fair and equitable and at market value with other properties that are being assessed in the area. And then it goes up through them and signed all the way through our department.
Okay, so do we have, now this process you have, we don't have any of those internal documents here, do we?
Well, I've provided the request for increase.
No, I meant you just described the process of going through the system. That's not something that.
We provide the request for increase. Those internal documents with the workups are
So
just kept internally, but
You
the workup,
reviewed this with your supervisor, and who's the supervisor?
I'm not sure what bearing that has on today's hearing, but my supervisor's name is Nicholas Ruda.
So did you review this workup with him?
Yes.
Okay. Approximately how long did you spend reviewing it?
15 minutes or so, I'm not sure.
Did you review it then with the managers after that?
Yes,
And
just the manager,
who was that manager?
Jennifer Lloyd.
Okay.
The workups that you make reference to would have looked exactly like the workups that I've provided in the brief on pages 5 and 6, showing what the income valuation
Do you
summary
remember
is.
the dates that you did this review?
I don't have that information.
And on page 24, the form you provided, I'm wondering if you could identify who signed the signature of assessor? It says for, so I don't know who that is.
I think at the time it was Tim Austin.
Tim Austin, okay. And who has initialed this?
I believe my supervisor, Nicholas Ruda, and Jennifer Lloyd.
And the reason I'm asking this for the date, because this is dated October 31st, and my understanding is that Mr. Ruda wasn't in the office that day.
He was in the office that day.
Oh, okay, someone gave me different information then.
No, he was
That's-
definitely in the office that day. He was in the office until 3 p.m.
Okay. So was this signed October 31st?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the date on the form. I filled out the form and I had everyone sign it on that date.
Now, in regard to your due diligence, is what you described the extent of your due diligence? Or did you do any more due diligence in reviewing this matter?
I did all of the research that I would do in any case that I request an increase or make a recommendation for decrease. I review all the information and what we're doing on other properties to make sure our assessment is fair and equitable and at market
You've already
value.
said that, I'm wondering
Yeah.
if there was any more to it than that. Is that it?
I'm not sure what you're getting at.
Well, is that, I'm asking, is that the extent of your due diligence?
I guess,
Okay. Did you review the property tax bill for encroachments?
no.
With the title for encroachments?
I have provided the titles in my brief.
Okay, and what page is that?
I provided them on pages 19 through 22, just because I know I dealt with this matter last cycle. And one of the arguments for class and liability was different than the argument I think that is gonna happen today, but I had these in the brief just so I wouldn't have to hand them out in the hearing.
All right, and that's page 19, 20 to 22
Yes,
are,
these are all of the units owned by the owner who owns the parking.
well, is this the precise unit under appeal plan B, phasing unit B?
Yes,
Okay, and the active instruments in here, I see caveat, notice, mortgage, amending agreement, postponement, PPSM, and there's no easement registration listed?
not that I can see.
Did you have a chance to review the survey of the site?
No.
Any reason why you wouldn't have? You have access to the City of Winnipeg survey information, do you not?
I have not looked at survey information for the properties under appeal today.
Do you know where the property lines are?
I don't have that information with me now.
So how would you have ascertained that the parking that you've described is located on the subject lands?
I looked at the property and as I walked by, I saw that there were signage there and there were cars parked there. And
Visual inspection
a
and your,
visual inspection.
and your assumption that they were on their property?
I did not review whether or not it was on the property lines. I made the assumption that because there was a sign placed outside the door, that if they were saying that people were parking there, that they were allowing people to park on their property.
To your knowledge, does the City of Winnipeg give its land away to private owners for private parking?
I'm not sure.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McIntyre. Do you have any questions?
Just one question, did you inspect the parking structure?
I did not. I have seen photos of the inside from an assessor who did inspect it, but I have not been inside.
And I think you said it's unheated.
Yes.
I was just kind of curious on the mailer on page 11, and I know they don't have all the expenses, but they got a gas meter rental.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that
But
is.
I was just wondering if it was heated. Okay, that was my question.
Ms. Stevens, do you have any questions?
I think you addressed the one question I had was the rate for the surface and the unheated structure is the same.
They are the
Yeah.
same.
And you're saying that that's based on what you're seeing in the rest of the area?
So when we analyze the information that we are provided from mailers for surface parking for the area and as well as their parking structures, and then looking at the gross rates that are charged, you're typically seeing the same gross rates in an unheated parking structure that you're seeing in surface lots. They're charging about the same, and in some cases, they even charge more in some parking lots. And then when you look at the information that's provided in the mailers, and then once we run our statistics and our modelers look at it, we're seeing that there is, it's about the same.
Interesting.
So we have, that's actually been like that in our model for the past 2 cycles.
Okay. And you were basing your opinion that there are 8 stalls based on the number of signs that were on the building and the number of cars that were parked outside?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have rebuttal information. Two pieces.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first page is from the City of Winnipeg's aerial photography site, and the red lines on here were placed by our people, just to show where the stall counts were. And you can see that they show an outside stall count of 6 full and 1 partial. And the blue line is drawn on by the City of Winnipeg. It's an overlay of the assessment boundary and the title line. And this is all information within the city's website. And the second page shows the photo without the red lines drawn on, just so you can see that that's originally, this is what's available to any member of the public, including the assessor. The clear conclusion is that the car parked in front of the garage door is on city land. That's correct. And because there's no charge for this parking, there's no impact on the subject property because they declare there's no income. The lot number 7 is on the 3rd page. And there's a garbage bin placed there. And we have 2 angles on it. So the garbage bin completely removes that parking stall from use. So in essence, we only have 6 stalls. Now, in the assessor's pictures, I found this rather interesting. On page, the ones that were taken at the site in January, page 16, show no garbage bin. They may not have been in the angle of the photo being taken. I don't know, I didn't take those pictures. The pictures I'm showing you here today were taken 2 weeks ago. Well, this is what it was like. So we're down to 6 stalls, and the first stall, number 1, you'll notice the blue line, it's curved, so it's not a full parking stall. It's a small car only or a motorcycle. For greater clarity, this is from the city's survey, which is this is all produced by City Geomatics, and we subscribe to this and purchase these surveys every year. And just to confirm, and when you look at this property, there's an overlay of the building in the light orange. Now, the overlay in the building, based on my discussions with City Geomatics, is that they take the aerial survey and they draw the building or have it placed on here. So they're saying that, they generally tell me that the building locations aren't 100% accurate. Their experience is that they may see a foot or 2 of variance, and sometimes if there's an eave, the eave goes in the picture because of the nature of aerial photography. Of course, the subject building has no eaves, so that's not in question. So I guess with a very simple investigation of two surveys that are produced by the city would indicate that there are only 5.5 stalls, so to speak. That's my rebuttal information.
Thank you.
I was just, is that appropriate, is there any, should I ask for if there's questions at this point on the rebuttal information?
I do have a statement. In light of the information that Mr. Neufeld has provided, I'd like
Liking the rebuttal information?
the rebuttal
Okay.
information, I'd like to revise my request for increase. If you turn to page 5, I will acknowledge that one stall is not on city property, the one in front of the garage. And so I will not assess that stall. So I would like to revise my assessment to 7 stalls at $103.50 for a value of $193,000, for a total value of $299,000.
Okay, did you have any questions for him, other than your statement?
No, I don't have any questions, I just,
Okay.
I do have a question. Is this an admission that there was an error in the request for increase?
I will acknowledge that I did not notice that and I did make an error on that stall count, and I will acknowledge that, yes, I made that error. And similar to the error that I noticed with the other stuff, I will correct that error, so I will acknowledge.
Thank you. Mr. McIntyre, did you have any questions?
I have no questions.
Ms. Stevens?
No questions.
Okay.
My turn on value.
Yes, please.
I have instructions.
Okay.
I did review this process with the manager of appeals as to what my withdrawal does. And it's a withdrawal of my request for a decrease, which nullifies the city's request for an increase. And it's been presented before the close of the hearing, which was, makes it effective and essentially ceases all appeals on value. And because of where this matter is going, I'm obviously can't discuss it any further than I've given you.
Okay. Can you just make a note for a minute, please?
Ms. Chairman, if we knew that we were withdrawing the property, why did we go through the effort of the past 30 minutes of hearing? I object to the fact that I sat here being questioned and presenting my evidence when Mr. Neufeld clearly knew that he was withdrawing the property prior to the start of this hearing.
It's not your job to question procedure.
Yes, he's only withdrawing the amount of the assessed value, so now we're gonna go ahead with the liability, taxation, and classification of property, so,
Okay, and then I start after that.
yes.
I have my report, and obviously you can now disregard the value. Starting on page 3 are several listings of the condominium, residential condominiums in 128 James. This complex is comprised of 120 James, which was a former warehouse, now parking and storage facility, and 128 James, which was a former loft warehouse, converted first floor to office, and second and third floor to residential condominiums. There are also 2 registered phasing plans on it in the event that they wish to have an expansion in the future. One of those phasing plans is on the subject property itself, that it is registered as part of a phase to potential future residential development. And then there's a further phasing for air rights, which was dealt with last Friday. Friday a week ago. Now, the users of the interior stalls and the exterior stalls, based on our review and investigation with ownership, actually condominium principals, were that all spaces were for residential use. And based on my own personal investigation, I fully support this. Just for the record, I definitely know that the cars shown in the assessor's photographs taken in September or January a year ago are the cars of the owner of the property, or the developer of the property, who owns 5 units inside 128 James, one of which he lives in, the others which are available for sale or rent. So as residential parking, it should be class 20.
Is that your presentation?
That's it. Page 16 of the assessor's brief, the white BMW and the dark colored Porsche are both owned by the resident owner, or resident developer of the site.
Okay. Ms. Wareham, do you have questions for the?
So the white BMW is the owner who's parking on city property illegally?
Yeah, you should get a ticket.
Wanted to clarify that. You indicated that the spots are available for rent to the condo unit owners, correct?
The listing says that they're available for rent, yes.
Okay. Do you have a rent roll of all the people parking there, as well as to show that they are owners of the residential condo units?
I've spoken to the developer, and he's verbally told me that they're all used by residential users, and that's, as you're aware, there's no requirement under the Act for residential property owners to provide income and expense information, which is probably why we weren't quite prepared for this. But since the assessor has been out a few times, I'm just surprised they never asked the question themselves.
My question, I'm not asking for income and expense information. My question is, do you just have a list of the people who are parking there matched to a list of the people who own the condo units to prove to our department that they are residential people occupying those stalls?
I don't have the list with me.
Okay. My next question is, looking at the pictures you provided in rebuttal, the signage on the building matches the signage of the pictures that I took a year ago. And it says that it's Veritas Corp. And Kai Asset Development or Management. Those are residential businesses or tenants?
The developer is Veritas, and they're also the condominium manager,
Okay.
and also the company of the developer. It's his working company.
Okay, but there's no information showing that this is residential?
Well, they don't put people's names on parking signs, because that's private.
I'm aware of
They
that.
put the sign up to keep people from parking on there. It says reserved parking 24 hours, if you'll note.
It does say unauthorized parking on it as
says-
well.
It says 24 hours. and
Yes,
that's
I'm-
because of the problems they have with people going to functions in the area, parking in their space. And I think the 24 hours speaks to it, because they like to park their residential cars in their residential stalls at night when they go home.
I was just questioning the signage of the business instead of just having a reserved 24-hour sign and the number. I just was questioning the sign.
I own a condominium that Qualico manages, and the parking stall that I own says Qualico. Doesn't have my name or my daughter's name on it. It's the way it is.
Those are my questions, Ms. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. McIntyre.
Just one question, being as this is on James, is there any offices on the main floor?
Yes, the main floor is an office, and the owner, the developer of the site has his own business office in there as well, but he lives on site as well.
So the whole main floor is his office?
Yes.
That was my question.
Ms. Stevens.
So just further to that, then, the whole main floor is office, but the stalls are all being used residentially.
Yes, and the interior ones as well, and just to be clear on this, the 6 indoor stalls do not take up the entirety of the building. There is some storage space as well for the residential users.
Can you remind me, because I'm sure it was maybe said and I've just forgotten, how many condominium units are in the building?
I don't have my folder with me. The second and third floor, it's, I wanna say 12, 6 per floor. Wait, maybe I can figure this out. I was just looking for unit numbers here. 304, 204, 302, 204, 201, Unit 12. Okay, you know.
Actually, I think there are only 10, because if you turn to page
Right.
4, on the last listing there, where it says public,
Right.
it's home to
10
10 exclusive
exclusive
luxury.
Yeah, 5 per floor, yeah.
Okay, so there's 10, and so in your evidence, you're saying that there are 12 stalls for the residents.
Well, the owner, developer, resident has 3 of his cars on the site.
But he actually lives there as well.
Yes.
All right. Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
You asked my question. Brent answered it, so.
There we go.
Sorry.
Good teamwork.
Page 8 of my report shows the interior parking, and that is one of the owner's cars as well inside. Residential owner, and the other part of the interior is above is the storage space, bicycles, ping pong table. And this is an older picture, but that's the storage space as well. So it's residential storage. Page 11, there's a barbecue in the parking space, one portion of it, all residential use. The business portion of storage is actually contained in the basement. They have a storage facility in the basement for the business.
Madam Chair, I have one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
On page 9, the top picture, that looks like an overhead gas-fired furnace unit in the corner.
Page,
9 at the top.
space heater, yeah, that looks to me like one too. At one time, I know that the space was heated because it was part of a heated warehouse structure, and it was, this is the loading dock. I don't know about the functionality today.
Okay, that was my question.
'Cause when I was in there, I'm thinking, was I wearing my coat or not?
Okay, thank you very much. We are going to take a break now.
Oh, was the assessor have anything to say on the, I missed that,
Oh, I'm sorry.
on
Sorry.
loss and liability?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm a little frazzled right now, sorry.
No, we disagree with Mr. Newfeld's position, and we don't feel that he's provided enough evidence to us to change the class and liability from its current of 60T to 20.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to call this meeting back to order. I'm going to be recusing myself from the rest of the docket due to a conflict. However, I will be naming Mr. McIntyre as acting chair. So, thank you very much, and I hope the rest of you have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't miss me too much.
Oh, we'll miss
We will miss.
I can get the door open. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, bye.
Since this is my first meeting, you'll have to be patient with me as chair.
We'll proceed to the second property on the docket, 180 King Street.
Are you staying over there? Sorry. I don't know if I should move over or not.
Should I move over?
Yes, you should.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
It says chair right there.
Well, I can move aside.
I have to be beside you,
No,
I think. I don't know.
makes two of us.
Ms. Wareham, if you'd like to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're looking at 180 King Street, roll number 13071463700, file number 191882. The address is 180 King. This is a parking structure, an underground heated parking structure located underneath 180 King Street and 201 Princess Street, between King Street and Princess and James and Rupert. We have 67 indoor parking stalls that we're assessing. The owner reports that there are 134 stalls there. Half of the parking lot is used for the tenants of the apartment building at 201 Princess, and half is used for the office building at 180 King, and it's public parking and tenants of the office building who park there. And it's operated by MPark. So we only assess for the 67 stalls. I'm recommending to maintain a 2020 assessed value of $1,378,000. If you look on page 2, you'll see aerial photos of the subject property. The blue line outlined is the parking structure. It's a little bit bigger than that area because the parking structure is actually underneath almost the whole complex. If you look on page 3, you'll see the entrances of the doors to the parking structure on Rupert Avenue, and that is how you get in and out of the structure. On page 5, you'll see the income valuation summary. We have 67 indoor heated parking stalls, and our model rent is $120 for heated parking in this area, for a net operating income of $96,480 with a cap rate of 7%. For a value of $1,378,000. If you look on our comparables on the bottom of page 5, the subject property is number 7. They are indicating that they're making $94.28. The reason for that being so low is we don't believe they're charging market for their heated parking. They're charging $180 a stall, and that is significantly below what is typically seen in the market for heated parking structures. You'll note if you look at my comparables, another heated parking structure is 447 Portage, and they're charging $200 to $205. That's also similar to this one. It's in a, it's on the corner of Balmoral and Portage Avenue. It's underneath an office building there. Another heated structure that we have on the list is 299 Forge. They are making $170 a stall. That is below Winnipeg Square. That is probably one of the most premier parking structures. And we would typically assess that much higher, being a premier parking structure. This is typically in a On an outside of the fringe location, we typically assess parking structures that are in this area a little bit lower than something that's closer to Portage and Main and the MTS Center. If you look, 223 James Avenue is also a heated parking structure with underground parking. It's very similar to the subject property. They have 59 stalls there, and they are charging $220 a stall. It's essentially directly across the street. If you look at my aerial photo, this is 180 King on page 2. If you look over here, this is 223 James. So those are two very similar properties. I have been in both of them, and one is charging $220 and one is charging $180. Also, based on the information that we've looked at with respect to gross rates, we believe $180 is under market. Typically, you're seeing higher than that or that rate being charged for surface parking. If you turn to page 6, you'll see gross rates that are charged for parking structures. In the downtown, these are taken from websites as of the reference date of April 1st. If you look at 251 Donald, that's a heated parking structure. They're charging from $207 to $271. At 343 York, that again is another heated parking structure. They're charging between $210 and $285. And you can see the other heated structures down the list. On page 8, you'll see cap rate information. Again, our cap rates for parking structures are not shown on this. The companies that provide cap rate reports and information do not report them on parking structures. These are the properties they report them on, so we have shown our similar property types. Again, as previously stated in this hearing, parking structures do not sell frequently, and having parking structures sell with income available to derive a cap rate on is not readily available. As previously stated, 299 Fort sold in 2010 from the city of Winnipeg to its current owner for an 8% cap rate. That parking structure at the time of the sale had about a 300-page engineering report attached to it with millions of dollars of renovations and remediation that needed to be done on the parking structure. As well, there was some air rights value that was incorporated into that sale, but it was reported at 8%. So we have to use that sale with caution, but again, that is a cap rate that was reported for a parking structure. So knowing the things that were involved with it and the state of disrepair that the structure was in, but also knowing that there were some air rights possibly involved in that as well, we do have to use it with caution, but we have to look at that as a sale that was happening. Another sale that happened for parking structures was 295 Gary Street. It sold with a building and units attached to it that was then divided out and subdivided with air rights involved in it and split off into different sections. And then it subsequently sold as a share sale, which we have no information on. We just know that it sold as a share sale due to evidence that was brought forward before this board for the 2018 cycle. We still have yet to get information on what the sale price was. That property was under appeal last week, and we tried to get information, and the agent at the time still was unable to provide information for that parking structure sale. He was able to say that he knew that the cap rate sold at 7.75, but I use that with caution again because they were unable to provide us that sale information. So we have to look elsewhere with parking structures. We have to look at what's happening with other building types, where those cap rates are sitting. We do understand that parking structures do come with a lot more risk. Cars are going in and out of it. There's a lot of wear and tear, so there is a little bit more risk involved than just a typical building like an office structure or apartment building. So we also have taken that information into account when we look at the cap rate. Again, on page 21, we've provided additional cap rate evidence for sales that have happened for other property types, showing where cap rates are sitting. We feel confident and comfortable with our 7% cap rate on parking structures. It's higher than other property types because there is a higher risk involved in parking structures. And when you do look at the cap rate that was reported on 299 Ford at 8%, again, looking at it with a cautious eye, 8% to 7% in, I think, 4 reassessment cycles, is about 1 basis point, which I don't think is a significant decrease, and it is a gradual compression, and we have been seeing gradual compressions in cap rates since that time. On page 10, you'll see the mailer for the subject property that was reported. They show the information on this and they say that the information and expenses are shared between the properties. So if you look at the information that I provided on page 5, for the subject, comparable number 7, to come up with that $94.28, I took the gross income that was reported and I divided it in half. And then what I did was I took all the expenses other than property taxes and business taxes, because those are specific. I checked the property tax bills between what's happening at 201 Princess as well as what's happening for this one. So the property taxes are specifically for the parking structure, so I did not have to divide those in half, and they didn't add the property taxes from 201 Princess as well. So the property taxes and business taxes I left as is, and so that's how I derived that information, was I divided all the expenses other than those two in half to come up with that rate. If you look on page 16, these are the in-park details for the subject property, showing they're charging $180 a stall. They only have monthly parking available here, and they indicate their number of spaces is 137, but again, the owner has, the history, reported 134 stalls, and we have always assessed for 67, and that has not been contested to date. That is my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm just gonna swear you in, cause I forgot. Where you was. Did you swear in or affirm?
That's right.
Could you please state your name?
Marcelo Navarro.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Mr. Navarro? Yes, you'd like to ask questions of the assessor? Okay. Yes, the first question that I have is pertaining to page 5 of your report. So for the index number 7, which is 180 King Street, the 45% expense ratio, was that calculated by you, or was this what the model has spit out?
These expense ratios that are here are what are reported on the mailers based on the information that's here.
Okay.
So after I did the calculations that I explained, that ended up being the 45% expense ratio.
Okay, and that would have included the business taxes?
I believe I included it for this one. I would have to double check the calculations, but I just didn't divide it in half. I would have to check if I actually included it, but I did. I just wrote in my notes that business taxes and property taxes were for the whole property.
Okay. And have you done a walk through this parking lot recently?
Not recently, no. I inspected on January 21st in 2014, and that's the last time I counted the stalls at this property.
Okay. In terms of your capitalization rate evidence, starting on page 21, just refresh my memory because I wasn't paying attention to the previous hearing with Mr. Neufeld. These capitalization rates that you've got here on page 21, now are these individual cap rates that you or the department has calculated based on 3 years of income and expenses, or are these cap rates that have been spit out by a model?
These are cap rates that have been analyzed. These are arm's length bona fide transactions where people have reviewed the sales and done a cap rate analysis where they have looked at 3 years of actual expenses, stabilized it, and come up with a cap rate from actual sales. So they have done a real cap rate analysis with respect to this. This is not modeled cap rates.
Okay, so your first, I'll just refer to it as sector, the office sector. There are cap rates ranging from 5.88, 6.35. Now, in terms of compression, what has the department said in terms of compression from the last cycle?
With respect to,
The capitalization rate of parkades?
so the cap rate that we used last cycle to this cycle,
Yeah,
7.5 to 7.
okay. So that's a 50-point movement in the capitalization rate.
Correct.
Now, do you have any evidence supporting that movement?
Other than the evidence that I've given in my testimony here,
Yeah.
no.
Now, in terms of, I caught on to a couple of things that you were talking about. The sale of, I believe, 295 Gary Street?
Yes,
Okay, where is that located then?
on the corner of Gary and Portage, on the south side of Portage.
Okay. And the property that is located underneath 360 Main Street, which property is that?
299 Ford.
299 Fort, okay. Now, you mentioned that 299 Fort was a sale, a complicated sale, because it transferred from, I believe, the city of Winnipeg to, is it Artist Reed who bought it?
I think they're the current owners.
Okay. Now, there is a lot of issues in terms of air rights. There was a lot of work to be done on it. In terms of the property price that was paid for it, would it have been reflective of the income at the time, or were artists projecting the possibility of the income going up in the future? Or could it have been a case that they were trying to monopolize parking at that time and simply buying up everything?
I'm not sure, we just know that was what was reported.
So suffices to say that getting a cap rate out of any arcade transaction over the past 10 years has been extremely difficult. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned the sale at 295 Gary Street. Now, that happened last week?
No, not last week.
No, not the sale, but the hearing for it.
Yes,
Okay.
I
Now,
think it was last week.
I don't know
It was
if-
on November
can
8th.
you mention who the agent was?
I'm not sure if that has any bearing on
I'm
this.
just curious. Because that person would have sworn, as I just did, correct?
Yes,
And they indicated that without proof,
without proof.
that the cap rate that they saw on that property was 7.75.
They said that that was the cap rate that they were told.
Okay. Okay.
And again, I'll reiterate, there was no evidence provided, there were no sale prices provided,
That's right.
it was just part of the questioning.
Yeah, and we know that, we've done this quite a few times, there's a lack of sales out there. On a side issue, has the city ever considered trying the cost approach?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
I just, one, so you mentioned that you feel that they're undercharging their rates, which seems like an odd thing to do. Is there anything about this particular lot that you're aware of that would cause it to have lower rates? Anything about the condition, the ingress, egress, anything like that?
There's a lot of reasons why owners charge what they charge, based on the information of handling parking appeals and discussions with agents and things like that. It's sort of an agreement between the owner or the manager, what kind of management agreement they have, what they wanna earn. There's a number of things that are involved. So what I do is I look at what's typical. When we're here discussing what market value is, you have to look at what's happening in the market. And I don't often, and I would say very rarely, see someone charging $180 for heated parking.
So back to the question though, so are you aware of anything about that lot that would cause it to have a lower rental rate?
Not to my knowledge. I've been in the parking structure. I've been in a number of parking structures. It's a typical under a building parking structure. It's sort of like a square. There's parking in the middle. I believe Mr. Navarro has actually provided in his brief diagram of what the parking structure looks like. I'm not sure of anything that's happening in it that seems like where cars are getting, things are falling down. It doesn't seem in disrepair. It seems like a typical parking structure of its age.
Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
I just have one question following on that question. Is it because the province owns that parkade that they keep the rent down?
I'm not sure. The people who work in the office building are a lot of provincial employees. The city of Winnipeg has a number of floors in that building, so I'm not sure. It could be, but again, I don't know. parking agreements with what owners and managers do and how the agreement is set up of how it gets managed, what they charge, who gets the income, all of those things can be quite complicated, and we don't often have access to that information.
Okay, thank you. That was all my questions. Mr. Navarro.
Yeah. Turn to page 1 of my presentation, just a summary here. Again, this is Winnipeg Chinatown Development. Site area is 27,222. We have the parking stalls at 69. We performed this count recently, so we're confident that it is 69 as opposed to 67. Zoning is character sector. And then I'll proceed to page 2. So the subject located at 180 King Street is best described as a single-level underground heated parking garage. There's also an office building above it that is not described in this brief that has a different roll number. The building is commonly known as the Dynasty Building. This is a 59,998 square foot, 5-story multi-use building with 138 parking stalls. Half of the parking garage stalls lie on different roll number 130714625500. And that is associated with the residential building located at 201 Princess Street. So I'll leave it at that. In terms of page 3, you can see an overhead to see where the parking lot is located. If you turn to page 5, we used the income approach as the assessor did also. In terms of, there's a typo there, this is actually heated. However, we did use a higher rate, a gross rate of $210 per stall for 69 stalls. This gave us an income of $173,880 gross, to which we've applied a 49% expense ratio. That gives us a net operating income of $88,670.80. We've applied a 7.5% capitalization rate for an income value of $1,182,384. On page 6, you can see our comparable information in terms of parkades. In terms of the capitalization information, again, we have not moved from the previous cycle. That is essentially a suggestion that there hasn't been any compression in the capitalization rates. From our perspective, there's just not enough evidence to suggest that there is a compression to 7%. Without a lack of information suggesting that, then we can't move on that capitalization rate. We have noted that in our information here. If you turn to page 9 of the presentation, one of the reasons that we've included the office sector in here is that we've shown that there's very little compression, if not any compression, in terms of the base capitalization rate. So we're not saying that the capitalization rate should be 5.5, 6.25 in relation to these office buildings. We're saying that the office sector capitalization rates have not compressed. That is what we've argued in most of our office appeals. And that is also the rationale for stating that there hasn't been a compression in the capitalization rates of parkades. Now the logic here is that most parkades are in fact servicing office buildings. So if there is no compression in the office buildings, we're suggesting no compression in the parkades. And again, I understand that it's a difficult point, given that there is a lack of information on sales of these properties. That creates 90% of the problem right there. However, since there is no information from our perspective that we can draw from to say but there has been a compression in the capitalization rates of these properties, then we won't suggest that there has been a compression. We'll stick to the 7.5 that was there in the previous cycle. And in terms of the summary on page 13, again, we're asking that the board change the value from $1,378,000 to $1,182,000. In terms of the appendix, we have some pictures here. As I mentioned, we were in here recently. I can't speak to the condition of parking lots. I mean, I've been in new parking lots, parkades. I've been in this parkade. It does show its age. I don't know what type of work has been done on it, and it's getting to that point where, again, this type of building, this type of structure, parkades, different than office buildings or other type of structures that have a typical lifespan of about 50 years. This type of structure has a shorter lifespan. That lifespan is typically around 40 years. And that would, from my perspective, be one of the reasons that it's also reflected in that capitalization rate. It has a higher capitalization rate. Again, there is more risk to these properties, as the assessor said. Another component is that they tend to age quicker than other buildings simply because they're exposed to the elements. Most office buildings don't have cars driving through them. They don't age in the same way. So that is another rationale for having a high capitalization rate on these structures. The next page over, you'll see the parking count. So we have a map for this parkade. This was provided to us. So we had several shots at this in terms of counting this parkade, and we went to it probably 4 or 5 times, because the first 2 times we kept on getting different counts from the people that were counting it. So again, we went back and reconfirmed whether we were actually counting these things correctly. So we have handicap count, sorry, these aren't all handicap, but there is, with handicap, there's 139 stalls. Without handicap, there is 138 stalls. Now, you'll also see a section in around 136 and 137. Can everybody see that? Where it says maybe 1, maybe 2. So what we noticed about this particular area here is that the dimensions are different. So we essentially said this could be 1 parking stall or it could be 2 parking stalls. What we found is that every time we were there was only 1 car parked there. And there's a lack of room there. So we don't know if they built a parking stall maybe for a motorcycle or something like that, and it's just being taken up by a single car, or whether there's 2 very small stalls there. Whatever the case is, we essentially said there's 138 stalls here, so for a total count of 69 for our area. That's, again, that's a difference of 2 from what the assessor has suggested. We're a little higher, but we're willing to say that that's what we counted, 69 stalls. And next to that, we have the 2-1 Princess, which is lot 47, essentially this lot here. And the number of spaces there that they've quoted is 137. Again, that's different from what the assessor's count is. It's different from what my count is. But again, I've counted this thing up to now 5 times. I think by the 5th time, I think I got it right. Their rate is $180. We agree with the assessor. That's too low. That's not market. So one of the reasons that we upped that is because we're reflecting market. So we've increased that to $210 per stall. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Werrell.
you have some actual cap rate information for the sales, and you asked me this question. In reviewing actual sales of cap rates, have you, your company, noticed compression in cap rates from actual sales from one cycle to the next? Or has that analysis been done?
Yes, the analysis has been done, so we stated that there has been essentially no compression. We did the office sector is actually provided in here. We have some rebuttal evidence for the apartment sector. So in the downtown, there's essentially three sectors from my perspective. There's very little industrial in the downtown. I think you would all agree with that. There's a retail sector, and not an excessively large one. There's an entertainment sector, which isn't really reflected in any of this because those type of properties tend to be valued on cost. And then there's the office and apartment sectors again. Now, the office and apartment sectors tend to be the largest, I think, portion of what's in the downtown. You're either living or working in the downtown or doing both. The retail sector is much smaller than those sectors. So in terms of capitalization rates for apartment buildings, so we've addressed the office sector. So we have some evidence regarding the apartment sector, and this is rebuttal evidence.
These are all the files.
Yes.
I'm not sure, I would have to look at this, but I'm not sure what this has to do with the information that
So
I've provided.
We'll see the rationale once we start presenting it.
Well, I think we'll take 5 minutes and let Ms. Wareham go through it.
Just because
Seems to be a pretty
I want to
extensive
know what
document.
it's in rebuttal to in my brief or
Okay,
in my presentation.
So, you've presented some apartment capitalization rates here,
Okay,
okay? On page,
okay,
sorry, I'm just going through your brief here. Okay, page 21. Now, these are the capitalization rates that the department has actually looked at. Presented in your evidence. We've actually presented this rebuttal evidence for every apartment hearing that we've actually had this year. So what it essentially states is that each one of these sales that were quoted here have issues. And again, it's pointed out in the rebuttal evidence here. You can start with each one, sale number 1, sale number 2, sale number 3.
I'm not sure this is relevant to a parkade structure.
and I think that's my sort of objection to this, because this was presented as supplementary evidence, and I'm not saying that we have relied on this in particular, and I was not the person who reviewed these sales. This is information that's put in all of our briefs. I'm not sure I can even speak to or review rebuttal, since I'm not here discussing a multifamily property.
Okay.
This is something that's in our agenda of all of our briefs.
Then what we can say is that we're not suggesting that there has been any movement in the capitalization rates of office buildings if this is not going to be accepted. So we'll leave it at that. We won't present on the rebuttal then.
Okay, thank you.
And to just be clear, Mr. Chairman, I think I was only asking you about your office cap rates that was
Yeah.
presented in the brief. You have presented information showing that companies have shown no compression, and you have shown sales. I was speaking specifically to the sales that you've provided in your brief that has been reviewed by Altus. I'm saying, when you looked at actual sales, similar to the ones provided here, and then
Okay.
compared them to last cycle when that analysis was done, did
Yeah.
you see any compression? That was my question.
Okay, so what we did is analysis of sales that we had information on. So we reported the capitalization rates. They were relatively close to the reference date, so we would have used those sales to support our evidence. In terms of the capitalization rates and the compression scenario, that was relied upon from the different agencies that provide that information, so. And again, this has all been presented in office dockets that we've done this cycle. So this would have been nothing new to your side.
Okay. And then my next question, so you indicate that you don't agree that there's been any compression, so you want to stick with the 7.5% that was applied last cycle, correct?
I would say if there's been any compression, it hasn't been a full 50 points.
Okay. So did
so-
you accept the 7.5% last cycle, or did you use a different cap rate?
In terms of this particular property, I believe we may have appealed it further.
I'm just asking in general, what cap rate did you use for parking structures last cycle?
I actually don't recall. Do you have that evidence?
I believe you requested 8% across
Okay.
the board.
Yeah.
Okay, and then my next question, you're using $110. I'm looking at your page 6, and you have some,
110?
or your 210, my apologies. So I'm looking at monthly unreserved below ground. Does that mean that those are the heated structures that you reviewed?
Monthly so 35 Albert, if you see, unreserved below ground, 335, monthly unreserved, I'm not sure if that's above ground actually.
I'm saying that monthly unreserved below ground, are those the heated ones that you've reviewed?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's 9 of them?
There is, yeah.
Okay, and your median of your sample size of 9 is $225?
Correct, yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
explain how you use
210?
210 if you're saying 225 as
Yeah.
market?
So, as I think you alluded to this, there is some higher end properties in this area. So, 35 Albert in particular charges a higher amount, right? 180 King Street is not in that area. We would, I guess, deduce that there would be a lower amount charged in this area. There has to be a variance in terms of the rates charged based on location, based on other parameters. And again, you alluded to this also, that there are many factors that come into play in terms of developing what that market rent, that posted market rent is in these arcades. What I would say about this one is that it's not as strategically located as the others.
Are medians typically affected by outliers like high rates, or is that typically averages?
I would say that averages are probably skewed more by that.
Also, when you say that you're using monthly unreserved, so there are typically other rates that are charged for parking structures, correct?
Correct. In any type of parking facility, whether it's surface parking or parkade parking, there is typically an unreserved rate, a reserved rate, and it can be for above ground or below ground. We typically use the unreserved rate. That is the methodology that we've used since I've been doing parking. And it is not here, but it is supported by the Appraisal Institute and how they calculate parking rents.
When you review your rates, you say there's an unreserved and reserved, but there's more than just typically reserved and unreserved, correct? There's unreserved 7 to 6, reserved 24 hours, reserved 7 to 6. There's evening, like nightly, monthly rates, like 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. There isn't just unreserved and reserved. Would you agree?
I would say that probably depends on the parking lot itself, okay? There are obviously parking lots that have varied parking charges, okay? This one in particular, I believe, only has reserved. And there's nothing else that we can compare it to. So we use an unreserved rate. We think it's probably reflective of the area and the location and the type of property. But again, it's $30 more per month than what is the posted amount, which some people take as the market rent.
I think my last question is, I have two questions, my apologies. Typically, the unreserved rate is usually the least expensive monthly rate charged, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, unreserved is sort of scramble, random parking, right?
It would be the opposite of reserved.
Okay, so for the particular property at 201 Princess, it says it's random 24/7 parking. Does that qualify as reserved? You have a parking
would
spot,
take-
but it's not actually reserved.
I would say that this particular spot is kind of unique in that it doesn't have any other type of fee structure. There is no daily on it. So it is a scramble. There's nothing else really to compare it to it. So we were looking at what we thought would be an appropriate rent for it, so we decided on 210. That's where we landed.
Okay, those are my questions, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Stevens?
Just one, can you just so I make sure I'm comparing apples to apples correctly here, with your expense ratio, did you work out your price per stall?
Sorry?
You have the city's price per stall has got the expense ratio worked into it, right? And I just trying to, so I'm comparing apples to apples here. So with your 49%, I came out at $103, but I'm not sure that that's accurate.
No, we used a 49% expense ratio based on these expense ratios that we looked at here. We're seeing that we're looking at the market, we're not looking at actuals in terms of developing our rates. So you'll recall that the actual rental rate for this property was $180 per
Yes.
stall.
Yes.
We ignored that. We opted for a higher
But
market.
but the city's got the expense ratio worked into her rate, right?
Yes, we do
So
it a different.
I was just trying, when I'm looking at them, I'm
So-
just trying to compare.
So we do it a different way.
Yeah, I
because
see
this-
that.
Parking rents are not net, okay? There is no such thing as a net parking rent. All parking rents are effectively gross. So when you purchase, whether it's a monthly parking pass or purchase parking on a daily basis, whatever is tallied at the end of the month is tallied on a gross basis. Now, those parking lots incur expenses. We look at the expenses, but we also look at the expenses in the market. We apply an appropriate expense ratio to that, and that gives us our our net operating income.
Yeah, no, I
Now-
understand
now
that,
they
it's
just-
just difficult when you're trying to compare these.
Yeah. Actually, their model.
Just to clarify your question, so I understand what you're asking. Are you asking what his monthly net unit
Yes.
rent versus my 120 is? If you take his 88,678.80 divided by 12 divided by 69, because he's using 69, it's 107.10.
107, see, when I worked it out, I got.
I just wanted to make sure I understood your question.
That's what
'cause
I'm trying to just, yes,
Sorry.
that's it,
Yes.
thank
It
you.
was a little simpler than I.
Maybe I probably didn't ask it as well as I should have, I apologize. I
No,
didn't-
I did that when I
Yeah.
went through and was researching all the briefs to come up
To
with,
come up,
figure
thank
out
you.
where we
Thank you.
were.
Okay, then that's all I had then, thank you.
Thank you. I just have one question. You inspected this parkade?
Many times.
Any structural defects in the floor?
There are, I think the repairs on this parkade are ongoing. There have been some in the past, starting, I think, in 2010, 2012, that timeframe. They're doing minor work to it, but in terms of that question, parking repairs and parkades tend to be ongoing. That's just the nature of the property type. So when you say to me, like, are there repairs going on? I could easily say back to you, when aren't there repairs going on in a parkade? They're constantly.
And that's a fair comment,
Yeah.
because I've sat in on other parkade structure appeals, and it seems to be a problem. Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
So are these not EA?
No.
So should I collect them and give them back?
Can I get them back?
Yeah.
because I'm gonna use them. for
Only
the
to
other-
use them again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You know what?
Save paper and
I've
trees.
already actually used these a few
I
times.
apologize, I
can see
drew a
that.
line through it, so I wouldn't
Yeah.
consider it, but you can just tear the
Yeah.
top copy off the top paper.
Thank you.
Uh-oh,
Here, not it.
thank you, Kelsey. Thank you.
And we'll proceed to item number 3, Lombard Avenue, with a question mark. Ms. Werner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, just let me get myself organized. We're looking at Lombard Avenue, file number 19-2218, roll number 13096179000. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $14,405,000. This is a parking structure located on the south side of Lombard Avenue, near the southwest corner of Lombard Avenue and Westbrook Street, near the Ball Diamond. This has a parking structure on it as well as surface parking. So we have 543 indoor parking and 139 outdoor parking in our records. If you turn to page 2, you'll see the aerial photo of the subject property as described. Previously, this property was 3 roll numbers. It was 2 surface parking lots and 1 parking structure, so it was 3 separate roll numbers. And in 2013, it was merged, and now it's 1 roll number. On page 3, you'll see subject property photos showing the structure as well as the surface parking. On page 4, you'll see request for income expense information. And on page 5, you'll see the parking lot valuation. We have 139 parking stalls. The applicant has 132. We are using a monthly net unit rent of $103.50 a stall. The applicant is using $118.25 a stall based on their 32 stalls. We are using a net operating income of $172,638 versus the applicant's $187,308. And we are using a 4.5% cap rate, which is our model for this cycle, versus the applicant's 7.5. If you look at the bottom of page 5, you'll see these are all parking lots in the exchange in very close proximity to the subject. They are ranging from $90.01 upwards of $300.74. If you look, the property number 11 at 0 Westbrook, they're making $90.01. That is in close proximity. 57 Westbrook, they're making $97.55. 129 McDermott is in close proximity. They are making $112.91. All of these parking lots are in very, very close proximity to the subject property. Those ones on Westbrook that I mentioned, they are at the Ball Diamond. And some of them have limited parking, so they don't offer all of their parking year round because the players park in them for free. So that's why you will note that they're a little bit lower than our 103.50. So I just wanted to let you know that there were things going on with that one. On page 6, you'll see parking structure workup. We have 385 stalls of unheated parking structure and 158 stalls of heated parking structure. Our monthly net unit rent for the unheated portion is $103.50, and our heated portion is $138. Those are our model rates for parking structures in this area. We have a blended rate of $113.54 versus the applicant's blended rate of $121.13, for an NOI of $739,818 versus the applicant's $789,264. We are actually $45,000 difference on our total value for the parking structure between myself and the applicant. We have used a 7% cap rate and they have used 7.5. We have $10,569,000, they have $10,523,520, which is a difference of $45,480. On the bottom of page 6, you'll see my comparables for parking structures. As noted previously in this hearing, the first 2 are not located in the downtown, therefore are not considered very comparable to the subject. If you look on my list, number 14 is the subject property on Lombard Avenue. They're reporting that they're making $152.44 a stall, and that's a rate including surface, the whole thing, the entirety of the 543 stalls plus the 139 surface stalls. On page 7, you'll see gross rates charged that we've attained from parking websites as of the reference date for parking structures. On page 8, you'll see the income valuation summaries showing the incomes that we have applied, that has been previously discussed. On page 9, you'll see cap rate information. Again, we've gone through the cap rate information. If you do have any questions and want me to go through it again, I can, but we have used 4.5% for our surface parking lots. Again, we consider surface parking essentially vacant land, and the parking, or the cap rates that we've seen in improved properties are showing in around the 5 to 6 range, and it doesn't make sense logically to have a cap rate for vacant land that would be higher than an improved property that has less capital cost involved. We just finished discussing cap rates for parking structures at length. We are confident that our 7% is appropriate and reflective of what cap rates, again, looking at the tough job of trying to figure out what an appropriate cap rate should be when there is lack of evidence. You do have to look outside the box. On page 11, you'll see the income and expense mailer that was submitted. The income and expense mailer is actually significantly longer, but for the appeal purpose, I omitted, they actually submit the rent roll of every single person and tenant that parks in every single stall for these properties. So I just omitted the part that includes every single parking stall and who parks there, and left the actual income and expense information in there. On page 16, you'll see the outline of the subject property. You'll show the parkades. You'll note that it says 57 Westbrook and 0 Westbrook. Those are parking lots that are no longer parking lots that are operated by them. They're reported here because they did exist in 2017, but have since been stopped being used as a parking lot and are being redeveloped. So I just want to note that that 57 Westbrook and 0 Westbrook are not what we're talking about. The ones that we are talking about are the parkades and lots C and B on that page 16. And on page 26, you'll see the rates that are charged by Richardson as of the reference date for the subject property. And on page 27, you'll see the addenda information. And I just want to go back to a comment that I made, because I think I made a mistake on something, and I just want to correct it in case I did actually make a mistake on something, because I have a feeling that I did. So just bear with me, my apologies. Yes, I did make a mistake on something. I pointed you in the wrong direction of some of my comparables. 57 Westbrook and 0 Westbrook are not operated by the Ball Diamond. They were the Richardson Center parking lots that were being redeveloped. So that's my apologies. The explanation as to why they are lower, I was mistaken. It is not because they're at the Ball Diamond, they offer free parking, which that happens in those lots. It's because they're charging $160 a stall there, which isn't typical for market in this area. At least that's my observation. So my apologies. Sometimes I go through my evidence a little bit too quick. That's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Navarre?
Yeah. So there's not too much of a difference here in terms of the net operating incomes that we have on this property, correct?
I don't think there's too much of a difference on any of the information that we have.
Okay, so what it essentially comes down to is the capitalization rate that was applied. Okay. You've applied a 4.5% capitalization rate to the surface parking lot. Can you tell me when these properties were effectively merged with the parking structure?
I said they were merged in 2013.
Okay. What is the rationale for that?
I don't know if I have that information in front of me. I don't have the information in front of me. I'm not sure if it was merged because we got a new title from land titles. Sometimes we merge properties because they're operated in conjunction. Because I don't have that information with me, I can't actually speak to why the merge happened. I just know that it did, and it went from 3 roll numbers to 1.
Now, would this have been, again, you're not sure about this, but is this typically something that's initiated by the owner or by your side?
To my knowledge, most of our replots and merges or divisions are initiated from land titles when we get new titles on a property.
Okay. And there are no other instances where you actually merge roll numbers on your own?
We do, yep.
Okay. Now, these two, we'll call them the surface parking lot and the parkade, operate as a single economic unit, do they not?
To my knowledge, the surface parking lots and the parkade, as well as the surface parking lots that were on other roll numbers, all operated as one economic unit.
Okay, but we're not dealing with 56 or 57 Westbrook and the other Westbrook property, correct? There's a
It is-
physical separation between
There
those.
was a physical separation, but they were reported in conjunction on the mailer and have been reported in conjunction and operated as one economic unit in the past. Because I've actually had to go for non-compliance in the past on those other properties because they were reporting them all together in one roll number.
Okay. Now, again, is this a standalone parking lot, the surface parking lot?
No,
Okay. So it supports, I guess, the building tenancies, correct? I mean, you mentioned that all the owner actually details every rental spot in this property, right?
they do. They advertise it on their website, so I'm not sure how much of the parking is comprised of public or if it's just people who work out of the building at
Right.
One Lombard.
So, I mean, have you been in these parking lots lately? Because my understanding is that they don't allow any other parking in there now,
Like hourly parking?
outside of the, I guess, the monthlies that rent.
I don't think they ever had casual parking in these lots.
Okay. So, is that different from, say, your standalone parking lot across the street, I believe, 125 Lombard? That's a standalone, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
No, I'm good, thank you.
And I think I'm good. So your issue is the cap rate?
Correct.
Okay. We'll proceed with your submission.
Okay. Start on page 1, which is the summary. Again, this is the parking lot here. This is a picture of the parkade. As you can see, this parkade was constructed, in actual years were between 1970 and 1976. So it's, again, it's getting to that point where it's reached its life cycle. On page 2, you can see an overhead of the property. And the site area is 87,120 square feet, zone multiple use. That means that there are varied uses available, allowed in this zone. If you turn to page 5, the income approach. So we have used a heated rent of $310 and an unheated rent of $215. And we have heated stalls of 218 and unheated of 323. And if you go through the assessor's evidence, I believe on her page 16, you can see the total counts there for 100 for Lombard Avenue. So underground, we have 218, 323 for above ground. I'm not sure about the assessor's count. We are going by what the owner, or the client has instructed us on. In terms of heated income, we have a gross of $810,960 and an unheated income of $833,340 for a total parking income of $1,644,300. We've applied a 52% expense ratio to this. The reasoning for this is actually, I will go through that at a later point when I go through the appendix. Essentially, we've applied a higher expense ratio. So this type of structure, again, we've detailed that it degrades quicker than your typical improvement. So an office building, an industrial building, whatever you have. It has a shorter lifespan. It's continuously being upgraded. What we noticed about this is that in terms of the capital reserves, going back many years, the client is putting away X amount of dollars towards this reserve fund. We haven't seen it in other properties. They haven't documented it. This happened to be the one property where it was properly documented. And it speaks to essentially having, there being a reserve. Much like we have in other property types, there is a 2 or 3% reserve allocated on the expenses. That is the reasoning that we've actually increased the expense ratio on this property. And if we go through it, we'll see that they are doing this. In fact, they go back many, many years. They're doing this on an annual basis. So we've applied a 52% expense ratio to this. That gives us expenses of $855,036, net operating income of $789,264. There's not much of a problem here because we're actually not that far apart from each other. The big difference is actually still the capitalization rate. We've applied a capitalization rate of 7.50. Again, we've gone into this already. We said there's just not enough evidence to suggest that there has been a compression. So we've left it at 7.50. Our income value for the parquet portion is $10,523,520. And again, we're very close to each other. The big difference comes in terms of the surface parking lot. So with the surface parking lot, we've applied a rent of $215 and 232 stalls. Now, we spoke about this. We've inspected this recently on 2 occasions. Two different people came up with the same count of $132. Or 132 stalls. So we're fairly confident that our stall count is correct and the assessor's count is not correct. So again, we've done the math here. The effective income is $340,560. Expenses of 45%. Typically, what we use as an expense ratio for surface parking lots is 45%. We've applied that 45% here. Net operating income of $187,308. No problems here because obviously we're higher than they are. $118.25 is what we've come up with on a per stall net basis, whereas they have 103.5. The capitalization rate that we've applied is 7.50. The capitalization rate that we've applied is 7.50 because, again, this is one economic unit. These two entities support each other, and those in turn support the office building at the Richardson building. If these were to sell, we believe that they would sell as one. They're unlikely to sell anyways, but if they were to sell, they would likely sell as one with one capitalization rate reflecting the entire property. So we've come up with an income value of $2,497,440. We've gone through the capitalization rate information. I don't think there's anything more that we need to go into. That's my presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Worrell?
Thank you. I just have a few questions. Mr. Navarro, you indicate that if it was to sell as one economic unit and it would sell with one cap rate. I agree with you, and I agree in the sense that it would sell with one cap rate. But I think what I'm asking you is, have you applied the parking structure cap rate to the parking lot, or have you applied a blended cap rate knowing what typical cap rates for parking lots would be as a blended cap? Because the city for the whole property has a blended cap rate of 6.33%.
I haven't applied a blended cap rate. I've applied the single cap rate for the parkade to the entire property. Again, as I said, this would, in my opinion, sell as one economic unit, having one capitalization rate. The dominant part being the parkade. Now, in terms of why I haven't used a 5% cap rate on this, as opposed to your 4.5% cap rate, is because that is, in my opinion, a reflection of a standalone parking lot.
Okay.
One economic unit. This, in my opinion, is one economic unit, but again, it is the larger parkade that I think would be where the capitalization rate would be determined. This is actually not that different than what the city has actually done now with retail properties, where they used to break apart the capitalization rates for each economic entity. They are now presenting one capitalization rate. In my opinion, again, and their interpretation is that it would sell as one economic unit with one capitalization rate. Agreed. That would be the same for this type of property that performs as one economic unit. If you see the income and expense information, there's no separating these two entities out. They are reflected as one economic unit. For that reason, in my interpretation, they would sell as one with one capitalization rate, not one with a lower capitalization rate, simply because it's a surface parking lot and we have to find surface parking lot cap rates.
So you would agree that you have used a 5% cap rate, I believe you said that in your answer, a 5% cap rate for parking lots in this area previously for the 2020 cycle?
I would say that for
Standalone parking, 5% is the cap rate you have requested
No.
for, in this area?
In this area, up to now, what I've done with the parking appeals that I've looked at, I've looked more at the per square foot value of the land to see whether it's relative to what I have in terms of sales information. And again, with surface parking lots, I mean, we haven't really gotten into an argument on surface parking lots yet.
I think my question was, did we handle a docket of exchange area parking lots previous to this for the 2020 cycle?
Yes, yeah.
And the requested cap rate in was 5%, correct?
The requested, yes, yeah.
With respect to the subject property, you indicate that it wouldn't sell, it's one economic unit. You handled this appeal for the 2018 cycle, correct?
Correct.
Did you apply two separate cap rates in that cycle, or did you apply one cap rate?
In that cycle, I applied two separate cap rates. However, this is a new de novo case, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So my opinion has changed on this.
Yep.
I'm applying one capitalization rate to this, and again, this comes from the fact that I think this is one economic unit.
And then my next question, you've gone through your evidence and you've gone about coming up, and you made mention of this in the previous property, that coming up with what market value is, correct? So market value is what a willing buyer and seller would get for a property. Would you not think when looking at market value, you're looking at sort of fairness and equity as well? Do you think it is fair and equitable to have a number of parking lots in close proximity where it has one cap rate and then on this one it has a different cap rate?
I would disagree with you on that.
Okay.
I think if you were valuing a standalone parking lot, then you would compare it to other standalone parking lots. Again, the reasoning in this case is simply because this is one economic unit. This is not the single case where this has happened either, I mean, so.
You also made mention that this parking unit, we'll call it, supports the office tower, correct? So if it supports the office tower, what's the cap rate on the office tower?
Well, I think the office tower capitalization rate is irrelevant. I mean, that's another roll number. We're talking about this economic entity, which is the parkade and the surface parking lot.
Okay. I think those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
I think all my questions were asked and that, answered and that has changed, so I'm good, thank you.
And I have no questions. Thank you. And this brings us to item number 4 on the docket. Ms. Wareham?
Thank you. I just have to give me a moment to organize myself. I'll try to go quickly. All right, we're looking at 343 York Avenue. The file number is 19-4154. The roll number is 12093436700. This is a parking structure. We have 2 class and liabilities on it because there is residential parking here on record. It is managed by a parking management company that offers different parking rates for residential tenants. You have to provide proof of tenancy that you are a tenant there to get that residential rate. So we have a portion of the parking structure as 60 and the other portion as 20. This parking structure is heated and it's known as Lakeview Square Parkade, and it's under the city block bounded by Carleton, St. Mary, Hargrave, and York. It is underneath the office building at 155 Carleton and 185 Carleton. It's underneath the Delta Hotel at 350 St. Mary, and it's also underneath 170 Hargrave and 160 Hargrave, known as the Holiday Towers apartment buildings. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value for a total value of $12,538,000, split out for the 60T portion as $5,394,000, and the 20T portion as $7,144,000. On page 2, you'll see aerial photos of the subject property showing its location as described. On page 3, you'll see the 2 entrances. The top entrance is the entrance that is off York Avenue, and the bottom picture is the entrance that is off of St. Mary Avenue. On page 5, you'll see the parking structure workup. This is for the 20T. We are assessing 302 stalls of the total 530 as 20, and we have our monthly net unit rent, which is our modeled rate of $138 a stall, with a 7% cap rate for a value of $7,144,000. On page 6, you'll see 228 stalls that we have assessed at other property with our monthly net unit rent of $138 a stall. And the 7% cap rate is $5,394,000. On the bottom of my page 6, you'll see income and expense information that's been reported by owners on a per stall basis. You'll note that we have a number of unheated, heated parking structures. They range from $84.70 upwards of $175.37. The top 2 comparables are not located in the downtown, therefore I would consider them not comparable to the subject property. Again, on page 7, this is gross information that is reported On parking websites, you'll note that number 10 is 343 York. They've listed that on the InPark website that they have 530 stalls, and they range from $210 a stall to $285 a stall, and they have hourly, daily, and evening parking. On page 8, you'll see the 2 income streams for the subject property. On page 9, you'll see cap rate information. On page 10, you'll see the income and expense mailer that was submitted by the owner. They've indicated that they have 250 residential parking stalls at $105 monthly. On page 9 is the remainder of that, and then on page 21 are the rates charged by InPark. This was taken from the InPark website as of the reference date. They have a rate of $285 a month, and at the reference date, there was a wait list to get that parking. $210 for random scramble 24/7 parking. There was not a wait list for that, and then a reserved parking from 7 till 6 p.m. only for $255, and there is a wait list for that. On page 22, again, the InPark details showing 530 stalls, as well as their hourly, daily, and evening and weekend rates. And then on page 23 through 28, the addenda. You'll notice that I went more quickly through that presentation.
Thank
We
you,
have
Ms. Ware.
covered things at length, so if you need more clarification, I'm happy to answer, but I feel like both parties have covered a lot of the arguments that we've made.
I think we agree. Any questions?
Yeah. You're coming out with a net rent of $138 per stall, correct?
Correct.
But yet the unreserved rate for this property is $210. Now, even if I apply a 45% expense ratio, I'm coming out with $115.50 on that one. I used a 49% expense ratio and came out with 107.10. Can you account for why it's so high?
The 138 is market value for our model for similar
So
parking
that's
structures
what
in
the
the
model
area.
established.
We don't take what the actuals are, and 110, when we
Lower.
review our gross rates, is the lowest rate. We would look at what the
Just,
sorry,
you
I'll
said
go,
actuals?
I'll go back to what I was saying.
Okay.
The actual rate charged that you referenced is 210, but that's
So
only.
that is the posted market rent, correct?
Posted market rent, but that's only one of the posted market rents. It ranges from 210 to 285.
Okay, but for this property, the posted market rent is $210, correct? For
It's-
unreserved.
And again, we have sort of gone into this already. The posted market rents are 210, 255, and 285.
Okay.
The city believes you should consider all of the rates that are charged and not just the lowest one, so that is a difference of our opinion. You have chosen to use 210, but there are 3 posted rates.
Can you tell me which ones those are again?
On page 21, 285, 210, and 255. And there are actually wait lists for the 2 highest rates that are charged. We believe discounting higher gross rates is not taking into account actually what's happening in a property.
So you don't actually support the idea that the unreserved rate is the standard for developing a market rent?
When you look at and I've read the AIC document that you're referring to, when you actually look at that and you look at unreserved, there are a number of types of unreserved. And there are a number of types of reserved. For example, at the last property, or at the property at 180 King that we talked about, that's typically unreserved parking. You have unreserved scramble parking, but for 24/7. So when you say unreserved versus reserved, it's looking at it sort of, in my opinion, and again, this is my opinion, so please don't take offense, you're sort of looking at it in tunnel vision. You have to take into account everything that's happening, because you could look at a parking structure, and we're gonna have one on the docket that has 10 to 12 posted rates. And to take the lowest one, there are a number of parking stalls that are actually being charged higher rates. So when you are analyzing gross rates, I think it's important to be cognizant and look at an average of the rates that are charged at a particular structure, and then look at that average rate and compare it with the other average rates that are charged, because you're discounting what's happening there.
That could be correct if maybe you knew what the exact count of reserved versus random. Do you know that?
No,
Okay. So then you don't know how it's skewed in terms of the breakup of reserved versus random. Would you say that typically random or unreserved is usually a larger portion of the parkades?
I don't know, I have never seen the breakdowns. Parking management companies are very hesitant to give us information. We have gone about the effort to try to gather information from parking management companies, and they've been very, not cooperative in the past. So,
Have you been in a parkade lately?
based on the information, I've been in a number of,
How is that relevant?
Well, when I drive through them, it's usually the first little section that's reserved. And then everything else above that is unreserved.
it's dependent on what's happening in the parking structure and what the parking structure is used for. There's a lot of times where it's reserved, 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 and you go up 3 levels. There are some times where it's a smaller amount.
But you're not sure in this case?
In this particular case, we're not sure, and we don't have that information provided to us, but I'm not speaking as to what I'm saying the rate should be. I'm saying when we analyze gross rates, we're looking at all the rates. We're not just looking at the one. But again, the evidence that I've presented here today with my comparables are net rents that are provided by owners on income and expense mailers as to what people are making. And when you look at my comparables, we have heated structures at 170 at 299 Fort. The subject is at 138, and I believe it's inferior to 299 Fort. We have 136 McDermott, which is a majority of unheated, and they're making $150 a stall. And again, the subject is at 138. If you look at 223 James, they're under a building and heated, and they're making $133.63. We're at 138. You look at 180 King, fully heated under a building, $94.28, and we're at 138. 170 Market, totally unheated above grade, $175. So on and so forth. Looking at 447 Portage, totally unheated under a building at $130.27. So this net information is the information we are presenting and how our model is built to come up with that 138, and I believe those comparables very clearly defend our $138.
So, just to actually add to that, now, you mentioned a few properties here, for example, was it 223 James, okay? 223 James with a stabilized net operating income of $133.63 per stall. Now, the expense ratio on that one is 39%.
Based on what they're reported, yes.
Performs a little bit differently than what we're suggesting at this property, correct?
The expense ratio you're suggesting?
Yeah.
The expense ratio you're suggesting is based on 3 sales, or 3 expense ratios. The expense ratio that we are presented there is what's reported.
Okay.
So we see a typical expense ratio of parking structures as 45%, based on looking at expense
Right.
ratios that we model that are presented here today.
Yeah.
Those are reported expense ratios, and based on modeling expense ratios, typical is 45%, and you're using 49. So I don't think we're too far different on what we think expense ratios
Okay.
are, typical for parking
So,
structures.
just to go over some of these, the expense ratio for 299 Ford, 936 stalls is 46%. We can go down to, I'll avoid 180 King altogether, but 100 King Street, this is a newer parkade, I believe.
Correct?
53% expense ratio. 329 Hargrave, 52% expense ratio.
329 Hargrave does have a higher expense ratio because they're charging below market rents and offering a significant amount of free rent and subsidized parking to people for their office building.
35 Albert, you have it at 33%, but we know that that's wrong, actually. That's actually 49%. 131 Smith, 41%. Lombard, 48%. 266 Hargrave, 50%. So a lot of these higher counts, larger parkades are actually performing at a higher expense ratio. So to say that, a property like 223 James has a 39% expense ratio, $133.63. You kind of have to look at the entire process, from gross income right to that net operating income, to see what's happening at that parking lot. You can't just point at the stabilized net operating income and say, that's how these things are operating. As I said, I took a look at 35 Albert Street again, used the relevant taxes, and it came out to 49%. So, again, I don't think I'm stretching the truth when I say that the expense ratio is a little bit higher than what you're suggesting. Now, your model in the past, and you've mentioned this in the past, that the city's model actually predicts an expense ratio, does it not?
Yes, we model an expense ratio, and I
And
said it's 45%.
45%. So really, we're talking about a 4% difference.
And that's what I just said.
Okay.
And I think we've heard that issue enough,
Okay, so we won't have to anymore now.
as well as I don't think we need to go through the rent comparables, because we've gone through them enough.
Yeah.
Both agree?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I went through them in response to the questions. Again, if I'm being
No,
asked
that's fine.
questions on the same stuff, I have to give the same answers.
Yes. Now, where are we at?
That's what I was just thinking. I think it's our
turn.
Our turn to ask questions. Okay, so model driven and based on comparables. How does the model, I may have asked this previously and I just can't remember. How does the model deal with the like hourly parking, like evening parking and?
Because there are so many things, and this is sort of where the applicant and myself have different approaches, because a lot of people don't report a difference in parking. Some parking structures, you'll notice they have hourly, transient, all of those things, and show what the differences are. What we end up having to do is, because people don't separate that out a lot of the time, and there are so many different things that happen, people offer free rent, people offer subsidized rent, people offer, like, there are so many different agreements with what's happening in parking structures and parking lots, between what owners want and how it's managed and all of those things. So many intangibles, location, whether it's gravel, what do they charge? People assume, oh, well, it's a gravel lot, they have to charge less. Well, that's not always the case. There's a gravel lot at Portage in Maine that charges significantly more than a lot of paved lots with plugs. Oh, if it has plugs, it charges more than without plugs. That's not always the case. So because there are so many things that are taken into account with parking that we don't have the information to explain or model or look at, we work directly from the net operating income, which incorporates parking lots that don't have casual, parking lots that have casual, parking lots that are fully reserved and don't offer it to the public. And then when the expenses, whether they have full expenses or whether they're leases with a management company that don't report a lot of expenses, we have to take all of that into consideration because we do mass appraisal, which is why we work from the net operating income.
So you're not,
And we don't deal with a gross, then apply an expense ratio, and then come up.
so
We
this
go
number
right
includes
from the net.
all of that? Okay,
Yes.
that was my question. Thank you.
And I have no questions. Mr. Navarro?
Okay, you know what, I'll just skip to page 5 where we have the input approach. So, then we have a class split here, class 16, class 20. I've applied a rent of $210, and again, this is the unreserved rent that we've applied. This is the posted market rent for this property. We have 228 class 60 stalls and 302 class 20 stalls. The income for the class 60, $574,560. Class 20, $761,040. For a total parking income of $1,335,600. Expenses, again, we've gone with 49% expense ratio. I don't think I need to get into that again. The net operating income for class 60 is $293,025.60. The net operating income for class 20 is $388,130.40. For a total of $681,156. Now, we've applied a 7.5% capitalization rate. Again, we've gone into this argument already. Class 60 value is $3,907,008. Class 20 is $5,175,072, for a total value of $9,082,080. And we've presented this same information again, so I don't think we need to go further than this. I'm open for questions.
Swear? Oh,
Sorry, I was waiting for permissions. Mr. Navarre, you just questioned me at length on looking at actual expense ratios of what's actually happening in the subject property. Do you have an expense ratio of what's happening in the subject property, or are you using your market?
I'm using the market, and I'm using market for the rent also.
So you're not using 210 because that's the actual posted rate, because you just said you're using
Okay,
210
so
because it's the actual posted
Let's
rate.
rephrase this again. That is the posted market rent. If we went with the actuals, we would be looking at the actual income that it's grossing.
Okay, but when I say actual posted rent, I mean it is the posted rent for the actual property, not from your analysis.
That is, yeah, it is the posted rent, which is the market rent.
Which coincides with your market. So my question then goes to say, your median is 225 based on 9. Can you explain why you've used 210 versus 225?
First of all, the median is just there to show a median of those samples, okay? It's not what I would suggest, I mean, and I deviated for that on 180 King Street. I posted a 210 rent for that one. I posted a 210 rent for this one because it was also supported by the idea that the random unreserved rate here at this location was $210. Now, I have a difference of opinion on this with regards to this. We think that the unreserved rent is the proper way of looking at this, simply because it is, from our perspective, probably the largest component of this parking lot.
Okay, so Mike, now you mentioned 180 King and it led me to this question. When I asked you the same question on 180 King, you had said that you used 210 because it was sort of on the fringe. Would you consider this property on the fringe, or would you consider it in the core of the downtown?
I would say that it's not on Portage and Main. It's not 290 Gary Street or 35 Albert. It's none of those properties. So yes.
I think this was a yes or no question.
Yeah, I believe it's on the fringe, yeah.
Even though it's connected to
The
2
entire
office
skywalk.
towers, skywalks, hotel.
What I would say is that a very large portion of this parking is actually dedicated to residential, right? We know that there's an agreement there in place. So right off the bat, how many 302 stalls are actually dedicated strictly to residential? That agreement has been in place since the 1970s. So again, we're talking about 228 stalls affecting the office towers, and those actually support those office towers.
I think those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Stevens?
This location's also close to MTS, correct?
No, I wouldn't say that.
MTS Center?
I wouldn't say that.
It's like a block away, isn't it?
A block away, yeah, maybe.
So in terms of the parking for events?
I don't know whether it has sizable, income from those events.
I just need terms of-
Again, we have to point out that 300 stalls are already dedicated towards the
Yeah, understood.
residential.
Yep.
So that leaves 228, some of which may be for the office properties. And again, these are random 24/7, so I don't know. I don't know how much room it would be for that.
Okay, that's all I had, thanks.
Is it not close to the convention center as well?
It is.
And it's connected by a skywalk?
The hotel is connected by a skywalk, yeah.
That's all my questions, thank you. Should we take a 5-minute break? Sure. And we'll bring the hearing back to order. The next property is 147 Provencher. I think we've heard that address before. Ms. Wareham?
Perfect. All right, we're looking at 147 Provencher Boulevard, file number 19-2640, roll number 06093212600. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $403,000. This is a main floor indoor heated parking area as part of a condo tower. It has office, commercial condos, residential condos. The parking is used exclusively for the commercial area and not the residential. It is located on the north side of Provencher Boulevard, just east of Taché. The photos are on page 2. On page 3, you'll see income and expense request information. On page 4, you'll see our model. We have stall count of 28 with a monthly net unit rent of $84 a stall. Again, that is our modeled rate. The owner, I will note, reports 30 stalls. I've been dealing with this appeal personally since 2014, and there are 30 stalls there, but a few of them are smaller and only offered for motorcycle. So what we've done is we only assessed 28 of them, because there's about 3 of them that charge significantly less. So we acknowledge sort of those 3 stalls as essentially 1 stall. So that's why you'll see a difference of 30 stalls versus 28 on what's reported and what we're using. That has been agreed upon since 2014, so that's why we have continued to use that amount. We have a 7% cap rate for a value of $403,000. The stabilized reported net operating income per stall per month is $84.70 for the subject property. It is comparable number 1. On page, trying to speed things along here, 12 is the income and expense mailer. When stabilizing the income and expense, we have not included common element fees. That's typically not a parking structure expense, and we also do not consider property tax appeal fees. That is how we've come up with the $84.70. They also charge $135 a stall here. And on page 18 through to 24 is our addenda. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro?
I'll ask that you confirm this.
Okay.
Okay.
Proceed to item number 6, 330 Smith, and I understand there's a preliminary issue.
We do. I'm requesting that the burden of proof be placed, actually I'll read the file number and everything first. File number 19-2822, roll number 13052181000. I'm requesting that the burden of proof be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation as per section 53(3)(b) of the Municipal Assessment Act, and if a reduction in assessment is ordered, that it follows section 54(3.2) of the Municipal Assessment Act. If you go through my brief, on page 4, you'll see the income and expense request information. Response received is blank. We have not received a response for the 2017 year. On page 10 is the original letter that we sent on April 12th for the subject property. as well as the original mailer that was sent, and that goes through pages to 15. On 16, this was the letter that was sent when we sent the certified mailing, and those go through pages 16 through 21. On page 22, we have the letter that was sent, and on page 23, we have the signature for the tracking that it was accepted. We don't have anything in the system to date. I have looked to make sure, and I have not found anything.
Mr. Navarro, any comments?
Was there a request for non-cooperation last cycle?
No, because they responded. I have a 2015 mailer information. I have notes that says I didn't request it. I don't believe I have the 2015 mailer in my hand, so I wouldn't have asked for it.
Who was that sent to?
The original mailer from 2015?
Yeah.
I don't think I have the original letter, I just have the mailer. When they respond, they don't often respond with the owner information, so I don't have the original letter here.
So you sent this to the parking leasee? Imperial Parking?
Care of Imperial Parking Limited, that's the mailing address we have on file, because we send our tax information, our assessment notices, all to the same mailing addresses.
And this, from what I understand, this owner is actually located in Calgary, so I'm kind of confused.
My 2015 mailer was filled out by Paula Prance of Impark.
Okay. But this was not sent to the actual owner, this was sent to Impark.
The actual owner information's mailing address in our system is care of Impark, which means that's where we send the tax bills, that's where we send the assessment notices, to my knowledge. We don't have separate mailing addresses where we send INEs to different people.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you. We'll take 5 minutes to deliberate this.
Oh, but he has to give his evidence.
We have to decide if we're going to grant the
No,
deferral.
but he has to present, you're not going.
No, I was just asking questions. Pertaining to the non-cooperation?
Yeah, he was answering questions pertaining to non-co-op.
He was asking,
Yeah.
but don't you get to have the say about this?
No,
He is allowed to
Yeah.
present, but I think he's choosing not
But
to.
you're saying you're not?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, yes, then.
The board has considered the request of the city assessor and has agreed to grant non-cooperation under the MAA, and if the reduction is ordered, it will follow the following year. Now, Mr. Navarro, you may proceed. Burden of proof is shifted.
This is Saju Holdings Limited, 330 Smith, roll number 13-05218-1000. There are 430 stalls at this location. Site area is 29,237 square feet. Zoning is multiple use. If you turn to page 2, you can see an overhead description of this property. This is a 5-story post-tension structure built in 1980. If you go to page 5, you can see the income workup. We've used a rent of $180, unheated. This is an open above-ground arcade. For 430 stalls, the unheated income is $928,800. We've applied a 49% expense ratio to this, giving us a net operating income of $473,688 and a capitalization rate of 7.5. The end value is $6,315,840. And again, I think we've gone over much of this information already, so I don't think we need to look at it.
Agreed. Ms. Wareham?
Sorry, I'm having a hard time finding the information. So you're using $180, correct?
Correct.
And that came from?
That came from the lot details. This is lot 125, 330 Smith Street. The random rooftop rate is 160, random unreserved 24/7 is 180, and the reserved 24/7 is 200.
Okay, so you're choosing to use the 180, but it's the posted rate for the actual lot, not from a market analysis of gross rates?
No, it is the posted rate, which we think is the market rate.
Do you typically do a market analysis of gross rates?
We would typically look at market rates. I think we've actually put them in here.
Was my question, because they're not actually
Oh.
in this brief, and they have been in the previous properties, so I was just
Okay.
wondering, that's why I was having a hard time
It might
finding
have
when I
been-
was asking
It
the
might have just been
question.
an issue of me rushing through this and just forgetting to put it in there, but it has been in our briefs. That said, we're comfortable with 180. In terms of location, it is in the downtown. We tend to think that this location is not a great location. It is also undergoing a lot of extensive renovations right now. Over the past year, many of the stalls have been closed off. So typically it would have a lower net operating income showing for 2017. Those repairs actually started at the end of 2017, are going on presently, and will be going on at least for the next year or so.
Because it's not in the brief, I'm not gonna ask the question on the gross rates, just because the chart's not actually here. So, those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Wareham? Ms. Wareham. Ms. Stevens?
Yeah, I'm looking at your page 2, that's not actually the location of that lot, is it? Or am I looking at this map weird?
No, you're correct. That is actually 35
So
Albert.
it's at Ellis and Smith, correct?
Ellis and Smith, it's right across the street from the Marlboro.
Marlboro Hotel, okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm thinking
Yeah.
of the right property, okay. Okay, so you've gone with the unreserved, posted unreserved rate, okay, as previously. Okay, that's, and your 49% expense, okay, that's all I had, thanks.
What type of repairs are they completing?
So this would be resurfacing, it would be post-intention repairs, structural repairs to the concrete, lighting, stairwells, probably at some point the elevator. Essentially, this parquet was built in 1980. Nothing has been done since it was built. I park at this location, I know it quite well. The stairs are a hazard on an icy day. And in fact, I've talked with them about getting some repairs done on the stairs. So that is coming, but it is essentially a large rehabilitation of the entire parquet. And they've been closing off sections as they're doing this. And this is not like, you know, 1 or 2, 3 stalls. This is an entire section at a time. And it's gonna continue on for the next year to year and a half. It's a very large job.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Okay, so again, as stated, I just read the file number, my apologies. File number 19-2633, roll number 13060011100. Oh, I'm on the wrong rate, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say,
I'm sorry,
where is
I'm
it?
sorry. I was looking at something else. File number 19-2822, roll number 13052181000. This is 330 Smith Street, located on the southwest corner of Ellis Avenue and Smith Street, just north of Portage in close proximity to the MTS Center. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $7,629,000. There are 430 unheated parking stalls in this parking structure. On page 2, you'll see aerial photos of the subject property showing its location as previously described. On page 3, you'll see subject property photos. On page 4, you'll see request for income and expense information. On page 5, you'll see our modeled information. We have 430 stalls with a monthly net unit rent of $103.50 a stall. That is our typical modeled unheated stall rate. We have a 7% cap rate for a value of $7,629,000. On the bottom of my page 5, you'll see parking comparables. 329 Hargrave is in close proximity. Again, that is unheated and it is in close proximity to the subject property. They offer a bunch of subsidized rents there. I just realized that I have been asked not to go through information as much. 266 Hargrave is also unheated and on the other side of Portage in close proximity. Page 8, you'll see cap rate information. We've gone through all of the information as to non-cooperation. On page 24, again, they're posted rates of $200, $180, and $160 a stall. They also offer hourly, daily, casual, and evening weekend here. Again, with no income and expense mailer to look to see what is happening at this property. We just know what was happening at the property for 2015. Again, we can't compare it to what they're actually making versus our model, so we have looked to actual reported per stall rates versus our model of $103.50. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
From your list of properties on page 6, what do you think are the closest comparisons?
On page 6,
You have a whole bunch of actual gross parking structure rates on page 6, correct?
I do. 365 Hargrave is close, that's on the other side of Ellis.
266 Hargrave.
Or did I say,
You
Pardon?
said 365.
yeah, I'm going through the list, 365 Hargrave is on the other side of Ellis.
And would you say that is a newer parquet?
I would say 365 Hargrave is an underground parking structure attached to an office building. As you can see, there's only 39 stalls there.
Okay. So,
So it's not actually offered to the public?
so in terms of what's nearby, what's close by, and what's comparable, would you say that 266 Hargrave is probably the closest comparison?
Based on looking at rates for parking, the closest comparable is 329 Hargrave, and they charge between 205 and 260 there. And again, that includes a lot of free and subsidized rents.
309 Hargrave?
Here, are we looking at page 6, or I'm
Yeah.
very confused when.
Yeah, I'm trying to locate where you have this property.
On number 25, 329 Hargrave. If you look at my photo in my brief, this is the subject property, this is 329 Hargrave. And I mentioned previously 266 Hargrave, that's on the other side right here, not pictured in this photo, but if you imagine Portage Avenue, 266 Hargrave is directly beside the MTS Center.
So 329 Hargrave, just to back up here, and this is that new parkade, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you don't think that there would be a slight difference in terms of what they charge on a new parkade versus one that was built in 1980?
Again, differences in charging rates varies greatly with a lot of things happening. I think you would agree, because I've heard you say this before. Posted rates are based on what owners and managers are both willing to make when it comes to management agreements. And 329 Hargrave, the posted rates on their website are $205 to $260. You'll note that on my page 5, they report $135 to $260 because they offer free parking for the hotel, subsidized parking for tenants of the office building, which isn't advertised. So that's why you'll see a difference there. But as I stated previously, there can be lots that have plugs that charge less than lots that don't. There can be lots that are gravel that charge more than lots that are paved with plugs. So talking about parking structures with respect to whether they're new or not, I don't think has as much of a bearing as what they charge.
So what's to say that the posted rate is not actually reflective of the market then, if that's your opinion?
I didn't say it wasn't reflective of the market because they're charging,
180.
again, I didn't say it wasn't reflective of market because they're charging 200, 180, and 160. I think 160 is a little bit below, but it is the rooftop parking. 180 and 200, I think that's around what market is. I didn't say that it wasn't. That was, I don't know where you got that from. I'm saying that there is a range. I never said they were charging below market. I said we have no information to see what they're actually making. I was asking you based on your information whether you were using 180 and that fell within market based on your information, but you didn't have the chart in your brief. So I didn't ask any more questions.
We're done.
Sorry, I just didn't know where those questions were going.
Ms. Stevens?
I'm good, thank you.
Just one question, is there any outstanding permits for this renovation?
We have a permit for repairs for post-tension cables and waterproofing on levels 2 through 5 from 2007. And we have a permit that was just taken out this year for structural repairs to slab, beams, column walls, tendon repairs to slabs, beams, and waterproofing is what it was stated.
Any value on that plan?
There is, but it's post-reference value, so I can't actually give you the economic information because the permit value was from 2019.
Oh, okay, I was thinking it was 2018.
Sorry, I said this year, did I not?
Yes, but.
Okay. This year in 2019.
No further questions. So we'll proceed to the last item. 36 Albert Street.
Now, before we get started, Mr. Navarro was kind enough to mention this to us previously in this, so I have done a recalculation. If you look on my page 5 at 35 Albert,
Okay.
yes, once again, for whatever reason, unbeknownst to us, I'm not sure why the owner does this, but that's another question. They don't actually report their full property tax amount. I'm not sure why, I don't know where that's going, but if you use their actual 2017 taxes and recalculate everything, it is a 48% expense ratio, so you can cross off the 33. And I have come up with $121.82 per stall versus the 156. So can you cross that off and put 48% and 121.82? All right, this is file number 19-2633, roll number 13060011000. This is 35 Albert Street. I'm recommending to maintain the 2020 assessed value of $19,354,000. This is a parking structure that has an actual and effective year built of 1990. It is relatively newer in comparison to some of the other ones we've been talking about today. We have 823 indoor parking stalls on record. And there also is some leasable square footage for some commercial space along Albert Street. So on page 2, you'll see aerial photos showing its location on the west side of Albert Street. It's beside 201 Portage, and it is the same owners as 201 Portage and the surface parking lot at 416 Main Street that is also adjacent to it. On page 3, you'll see subject property photos. On page 4, you'll see request for income and expense information. On page 5, you'll see parking structure information. There are 2 types of parking in this property. We have heated parking and unheated parking. 539 of the stalls are unheated parking with a rate of $117 a stall, and 284 of them are heated parking with a rate of $156 a stall. We have a blended rate of $130.46 a stall on this property with a cap rate of 7% for a value of $18,460,000.
Well, I'll just stop you there because the front page says 19,354,000.
Yes.
But we have a commercial section of leasable area
Oh,
on
okay, I
page
thought this
7
was
that
just- okay.
Ah,
going to get
not
to.
doing just a parkade.
I did say that, did I not in my
You did, you
presentation? We've discussed the comparables at length. I've mentioned what the subject is making. The most comparable to this property, I believe, is 299 Fort. They charge very, very similar rates to one another. And these are 2 of the best locations in the downtown, I think, for parking structures, especially considering looking at the rates that are charged for them. On page 7, you'll see the commercial space that we have assessed here. We have 2 premises for a total leasable area of $3,170 for an overall blended rate of $20.68. We have a vacancy of 7%. We have expenses of 2%, a shortfall of $13 a square foot, and an overall cap rate of 6% for a value of $948,000. On page 8, you'll see my comparables. This is operated by 201 Portage Avenue, so we have used the net rates from 201 Portage Avenue of small, similar sized areas. They have an average of $18.80 and a median of $18.63, and they range from $14 to $25. There are a number of smaller spaces, 995 square feet, comparable number, sorry, I have to follow the lines, 14 is $17.50. We have 821 square foot space, comparable number 16 for $20. The 2 at the bottom, comparables number 19 and 20, again, are smaller spaces. Again, our average is $18.80 and $18.63, and we have a blended rate on this of $20.68. On page 9, you'll see our income valuation summary showing the 2 income streams and our blended cap rate of 6.95% for a total estimated market value of $19,354,000. On page 10, you'll see cap rate information. On page 11, you'll see Municipal Assessment Act information. On page 12, you'll see the mailer that was submitted by the property owner. On page 16, they've reported that they have 283 indoor parking, those are the heated parking stalls, and 540 outdoor parking. Those are the unheated parking stalls. They say that they're charging $225 for the random parking and $265 for the reserved outdoor parking, as well as casual and daily rates. For the indoor parking, they do not offer hourly and daily casual rates. They have monthly rates of $335 a stall and $365 a stall. If you look on page 20, you'll see the mailer that was submitted. I did some calculations, adding in the actual property taxes and omitting the $90 that they, or the $90,000 they've reported as property taxes, and using the actual 2017 amount of $451,910.51. When looking at the parking structure, I have omitted the gross revenue, the rent attained from free rent and storage revenue, and the gross revenue that is considered based on the expenses is the parking revenue. And then the expenses that were not considered were business taxes. I changed the property taxes from $90,000 to $451,000. I have not included non-routine or appeal fees for the property taxes, and the remainder of expenses I have included, which ends up working out to my calculations of $1,210,398.88 versus our model of $1,288,404, which I think is a difference of $78,000 from our model versus the actuals with the corrected property taxes. On page 21, you'll see the rent roll. We've had discussions about the areas in this property before. I think the applicant and ourselves have agreed on the $31.70 for the area, although they do report different areas. I just like to note that the Concourse Physiotherapy, they're reporting a gross rent of $36.71. Again, that's a gross rent of $36.71. And then also the last statement on the mailer, when you're looking at the mailer, there's not a lot of information. When looking at parking structures that have such a small amount of commercial space, we end up taking the mailer and all the expenses in their entirety and applying them to the parking and looking at on a basis of parking revenue minus parking expenses. Because you can't actually break out how much of these expenses actually have to do with the commercial spaces. And because it's such a small amount, the gross revenue attained from the commercial is $54,870. Based on the total revenue of the parking structure of $2,323,000 and change. There's not a lot of information here that we can lean on with respect to what's happening in the commercial space, so we've essentially used this full mailer to illustrate what's happening in the parking structure on its own. On page 22, you'll see the posted rates for the actual subject property. And they have a number of rates. They charge $365, $265, $335, $225, $220, $195, $175. Again, there's a number of rents. As of the reference date, all of those monthly parking were waitlisted, which means there's not any available for the public at the time to rent. On page 23, you'll see the hourly, daily rates that are posted. Evening and weekend, and that sort of thing. They report that there are 828 stalls. And on page 24 through 29 is our addenda information. And again, I'd like to reiterate, because I haven't had to go through this on any other properties today. For 2020, we are taking a fresh look at properties based on our information that's been reported. Previously, we had a 5% management expense as well as a 2% expense for other non-recoverable expenses. We have removed that management expense. Typically, our rents that we have from our model are netted of management already. So we have applied a 2% non-recoverable expense. So the non-recoverables we apply in our model are the vacancy of 7%, the $13 of shortfall, as well as the 2% for the non-recoverable expenses. I would like to mention, you'll notice on the top of page 7, it says OFA. Because this is attached to an office tower, an A-class office tower, and this is a very unique situation of having commercial space in a parking structure, we are tasked with having to label this space as A, B, C, D, or S. And we feel and have felt in the past, which we have done as long as I've handled this property, we've applied an OFA parameters to this property. And I understand the questions are, is this OFA space, it's in a parking structure, it's not actually in an office tower. It makes the most sense to call it an OFA because we can't call it a B and give it B parameters. It's operated with 201 Portage, which is an A. Based on looking at the rental information from 201 Portage, which I've presented as my comparables, they're charging $36 gross for a very small space, which I have been in, and it is in the main level. It is not a very nice space. It is not what I would consider a office space, but they're still charging $36 gross for that space. That being said, with respect to that space, because they're OFA parameters, they do benefit from receiving our OFA parameters with respect to shortfall. A $13 shortfall on that space, which isn't high quality office finished space, and the carrying cost of those spaces would not be anywhere near $13. There is a trade-off that's there. So on the surface, applying OFA rents may not make sense, but based on the gross rate that they have of $36 and we're applying a blended rate of $20.68, it is operated in conjunction with the office tower, so they are knowledgeable people in the marketplace and would be charging appropriate market rents, but they are benefiting from some of the OFA parameters that they wouldn't otherwise get if this was classified as other. So I just wanted to state that because it's usually the elephant in the room with respect to this commercial space, so I just wanted to make sure that I addressed it.
Thank you for that. Anything else?
That's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro?
Yes. Would you say that the net operating income that has been reported by the owner has been lower than your model rate?
Is lower than the model rate
Yeah, if you take into account the tax issue.
by $78,000, and on 1.2 million, I'm not sure that's a large percentage to say that our model is significantly out. I can calculate what that percentage is right now.
Okay. You mentioned that you didn't take business taxes into account, correct?
No,
Why is that?
we don't typically take business taxes into account.
Is that not a cost to the owner?
The owners don't always pay business taxes. Business taxes, a lot of the times, are sent directly to the parking management
Does
company.
the owner pay in this case?
They've reported it, but they also apparently only pay $90,000 of property taxes according to what they've reported.
Well, we have a way of verifying that though, don't we? The actual taxes, property taxes.
I have not verified who has paid the property tax bill.
It's
and sent the
irrelevant, I
check
mean,
to
this
us.
is a fee simple valuation. So we would be looking at the taxes as the property is performing, would we not?
I'm going to say that they have reported business taxes. I don't know who has actually paid those business taxes. The owner has reported something very different than property taxes, and if we're going to take this mailer in full, then we probably should not be using the actual property taxes because that was not what was reported by the owner. And the owner has in the past consistently, I should say, not reported their full property taxes. So that leads me to question, do they pay those full property taxes?
So
Why
then
are
we
they
should
not
disregard
reporting
this entire information that the owner has provided?
No, I'm trying to use the information as I would typically for market, when I'm evaluating things at what is market, and we do not include business taxes.
You just calculated these figures recently, correct? I think
I was calculating them
Okay.
right now.
okay. So you didn't actually take the time to actually look at these things. You had about, what is it, a 10-minute window, 5-minute window there?
I've been
So we-
calculating it throughout the morning.
Okay. So I took quite a bit of time to actually look at this. So I included those income and expenses that I thought were proper, including business taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Came to a different conclusion, not much of a difference, I mean, I came out to 49.46 versus your 48%. But given that, what is exactly unreliable about these?
Oh, I didn't say that it was unreliable. You had posed me the question of why I didn't include business taxes because it was reported, and I'm saying, well, on the flip side of that coin is they reported $90,000 of property taxes.
But
So-
you're insinuating something, aren't you?
No, not at all,
Okay.
not at all.
In terms of the office the office portion, can we agree that this is not Office A standard?
We can agree that this is not in, I haven't been in all of the, I would consider this maybe probably storage space of Office A buildings, but yes,
Okay.
this isn't typical A-class office space.
Okay.
And I believe I made that clear, and I believe I explained the rationale behind it.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Stephen?
Can you just explain, is the office space at street level here, or is it in the concourse, or?
It's not in the concourse, it is street level. So I believe, I have not had an opportunity to inspect it, and Mr. Navarro and myself sort of went through this last cycle, and we hadn't, at that time, we didn't really know what was going on, and we didn't get a chance to inspect it, and I haven't had a chance to inspect it yet. I believe the 2,800 square feet is the commercial space that's sort of along Albert there in my picture on page 3. The concourse, or the concourse physiotherapy as it's called, we have as the 360 square feet. When you go into the parking structure, I have inspected that space. If you go in here, there's like a metal door with like a doorbell, and it takes you into the closed portion of the parking structure, so where cars go in that are parking indoors, it's in that area. So you go into sort of the inside of the parking structure where cars are parked, and it's down sort of like a little hallway off to the side. It's almost like storage space
Okay.
that they're operating a physiotherapy place out of.
And the remainder of it is on the street level, okay.
Yeah, and they're reporting other sections, so they, as I inspected this, because I did count the stalls, I think it was for the 2016 appeal, there's a number of doors in that are labeled consistent to the mailer, global TV and things like that, so there is other doors that have some sort of storage space in it, which we aren't assessing. But the two areas that we have consistently assessed are that space of 360 square feet where the physiotherapy is, as well as where they offer the free rent on the mailer gowns for grads. That's in that space.
Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
Just one question, was the parkade structure built at the same time as 201 Portage?
I do not know. All I know is the parking structure. I don't know when 201 Portage was built.
Okay, I was just curious.
1990?
99?
Yeah.
So that was the same year.
Yeah, I do.
That was all my questions. Mr. Navarro?
Yeah. We'll just skip to page 5, just because we're getting close to the time limit here. The income approach. So we have a heated rate of $335 per stall. That is the market posted rate that we've used for heated. Unheated, this would be the above ground. We've used a $225 rate. There are 284 heated stalls and 539 unheated stalls. So for heated income, we have an income of $1,141,680. For unheated income, we have $1,455,300. Total parking income of $2,596,980. We've applied an 8% vacancy to this. The 8% vacancy is actually alluded to in the income and expense questionnaire, which is included in this brief in the appendix. I'll also speak to that in terms of its, in terms of the situation overall with this complex. The tower at 201 Portage Avenue was experiencing high vacancy, 15%. This is what was presented by Altus Group at the hearing. That was confirmed, that 15% vacancy. That decision that the board rendered for that property was based solely on the agent's information. So the board agreed with us. We applied a 15% vacancy. Granted, that property is probably being appealed to the municipal board as we speak. However, that is the reasoning for applying a vacancy rate on this property. So not only was there a vacancy in the tower, and as everybody has already stated, the parkade supports the tower. The parkade itself was suffering from vacancy. This was noted by the manager, Bental, sorry, not Bental, whoever the manager is. We reflected that in the valuation. So our effective income is $2,389,221.60. We've applied an expense ratio, of 49%. That's $1,170,718.58. Net operating income of $1,218,503. That comes out to a rate of $123.38. And we've applied a 7.50 capitalization rate to this. The income value is $16,246,706.88. In terms of the office portion, leasable area of 3,170 square feet, we've applied a net rate of $17.60. Total income, $55,792. Vacancy, 7%. Effective gross income, effective income, $51,886.56. We've applied a shortfall of $13, a non-recoverable expense allowance of 5%, and other for 2%, giving us a net operating income of $45,369.80, to which we've applied a 7.5% cap rate and an income value of $604,930.68. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Ms. Ware?
I do have questions, thank you. So, applying vacancy to parking, we've discussed a number of parking structures here today, and you've applied no vacancy to those. Is that typically market to apply a vacancy?
I think it's, in most cases, it's a very difficult thing to apply vacancy in the marketplace because it's not something that's typically calculated. In this particular instance, the owner, the manager for the owner was able to quantify that vacancy. So we added that vacancy in its place. We also acknowledged that there's a lot happening with the tower itself that would have had an effect on this parkade. So yes, we applied an 8% vacancy to it.
Can you take us through the calculations of coming up with that 8% vacancy?
Well, if you look at the vacancy in the income and expense statement, again, this is what Dave noted at 8%.
Now,
Sorry for not numbering these, this would be,
so when you say 8%, that part of the mailer typically refers to the leasable area. They've said 4,287 square feet is leasable. They say they have 5 tenants and they say 8%. Would you not think that that 8% applies to the office portion of the parking structure? Because that's how it reads to me.
yeah, no. So vacancies in the tower were 15%, so they had sizable vacancy.
But I'm asking with respect to the 8% on the mailer that you just pointed to.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay, so you've
Yeah.
applied the 8% vacancy from the mailer for the leasable commercial space to the parking structure. I'm asking how you came up with the 8% on the parking structure. Can you walk me through those calculations? And your answer was the 8% that was reported.
Correct.
So you don't know where that 8% came from?
No.
Okay. Now, would you also agree this parking structure is not exclusively used for tenants, it is advertised to the public, and public can park there on a casual basis as well, correct?
Yes, typically the above ground,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, you'll agree with me, on my page 22, where I have the in-park details, and the date that I took it is March 28th, 2018, a few days before the reference date. Would you agree that according to what in-park is stating, that there is a wait list for every single monthly parking rent?
Correct,
Does that indicate vacancy to you?
probably not.
And then in my last question, well, I guess last question for parking structure, you said that you had calculated the NOI from the mailer and that you went into great detail to go through the calculations. Can you tell me what NOI you came up with from your calculations? Not the one that you've shown on your page 5, because you've indicated that you've used market and you've applied the actual expense ratio, and there's some vacancy in there. So when you went through the actual mailer itself, that I listed on page 20, that I ran my calculations from, where I came up with 1,210,398, which was only $78,000 difference from the model that the city has applied. What number did you come up with when you went through that?
In terms of the expenses,
No, in terms of what you, like, if you went through on page 20 and went through
Yeah.
this mailer in great detail
yeah,
and came up with what they are making minus all the expenses that you're considering and using, what is the final NOI that you came up with?
okay, so in terms of the NOI, I didn't actually look at the NOI, I looked at the expenses exclusively.
But, okay, so your expenses that you came up
Yeah, the
with,
expenses that I came to, were 49.46%.
okay, so your total, it says adjusted expenses on your page, so.
Because I adjusted for the taxes and the business taxes.
Okay, so my expenses that I calculated are $1,112,719.70. You've come up with $1,184,692. Could you tell me how you arrived at that 184, what you included, what you excluded?
I haven't had to, I'm not going to go through that process right now.
I'm only asking
Yeah.
because you sort of made
No,
a
but you-
comment that
you
I had gone through it quickly, but
You had time
you.
outside of this hearing to actually go through that.
But you said in your presentation, you went through this mailer.
Absolutely, and I
Which
came out
I
to
didn't.
1,184,692, adjusted for property taxes, adjusted for business taxes.
Okay, so I'm just commenting because you made comment that I went
If
through it
you want,
quickly, but you went
we
through it
can
in
take
detail.
A 15-minute recess and I can
I
go
was
through the
just-
entire.
I was just asking because you made the comment that you went through it in detail, but I will drop it and I will leave the
Quite
question.
frankly, you exchanged these briefs well in advance of
Yeah.
the hearing.
So,
So, I was just asking because the comment was made that you yourself went through it in detail, I myself did not, and I was just asking you to go through it with me because you had said you had come up with different numbers. That is my question, that was my statement, and I will drop it. With respect to your non-recoverables, when you went through the mailer, what was the actual non-recoverables that the owner was reporting on their income and expense mailer to justify the 7% that you've applied?
well, as you know that with most of these office dockets that we've handled, and we've introduced the 5%, reintroduced the 5% non-recoverable, we're taking it from the perspective of the market, not the actuals. So we've used, the 5% in combination with the 2%, 7% non-recoverables for every office docket that we've had. So I'm not deviating at all from what we've presented or any other Altus agent has presented in this case.
Okay, the reintroduction of the 5%, would you agree that the city's position of that 5% was for management? It was not a non-recoverable expense?
No.
So the city has not presented that that 5% that was removed was with respect to management?
I don't know what this, the city's position has been that that was taken away because it was actually reflected in the management recoveries. So it actually shouldn't be there as a management expense. However, with what we've presented is that that's not a management expense. That's a combination of various non-recoverable expenses in there.
Now, within my brief, I did present on page 28 a non-recoverable expense sampling for a median of 1% non-recoverables. Have you presented any non-recoverable expense information in your brief for us to look to defend that 7% if you don't have any actuals from the mill?
I don't, but I think, I think everybody here has been through one of these hearings where we've presented our non-recoverable expense study.
Are we not supposed to be making decisions on what's presented here today?
Sure.
I think those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one question. Your market rent at $17.60, you didn't provide any comps there. And so what was that based on? It's on the office portion, sorry. Clarify what I'm talking about.
There's no real rhyme or reason to this rent. We looked at some Office A rents, but we couldn't really find any fair comparisons to it, so we put a rent of $17.60. If we go through the assessor's rents, they're in line, I think, with those rents. This is for OFA that they've stated on their brief. So in terms of whether we think the rent is appropriate, we do think the rent is appropriate.
That's all I had, thanks.
I have no questions. And that concludes the hearing. Thank you both for attending and making presentations.
Thank you. And we finished before 1. Now everybody has to get out.